could have some lights, perhaps. I thought it was going to carry on for a second there. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Very good. How are you? How is the energy in the room? Are we feeling good? Excellent. Can I just say bonjour and thank you so much for rescuing me from the UK, where it's been a bit crazy recently, and I'm just so pleased. Not only have you rescued me from the madness that is the UK, but you have brought me to this beautiful city of Nîmes. And because of time constraints, I am going to cut straight to the chase and say Nîmes, in many ways, represents an awful lot of what we are talking about when it comes to sustainability and tourism today. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce Christian Delhomme to bring on Armé.
Bonjour. First of all, I'm not going to have my speech, but because we are late and Mr. Meyer has some other concerns after that. So I want to hand over to the Mayor of Nîmes, Mr. Jean-Paul Fournier, please. And he's going to say some words about this beautiful city and why we are here. Mr. Meyer.
Bien, Monsieur le Président, Madame la Vice-Présidente de la région Occitanie.
Mr. President, Mrs. Vice President of the region Occitania, Mr. Secretary General, Joint Mayor for Tourism and Joint Minister for Tourism, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor as well as a pleasure to address you here in Nîmes for this very important meeting.
Je ne peux pas être plus fier en tant que maire dirigé
As a mayor, I couldn't be prouder
comme capitale mondiale éphémère
to set Nîmes as the pop capital of the travel world. Mr. Xavier Douet, as well as our partners, have managed to make Nîmes the place of an exceptional forum so that we can think about tourism of the future. I would like to congratulate the initiative of Mr. Vonne van Hout, President of Eventis Media Group, something that will help Nîmes become the Davos of tourism. I know that many efforts have contributed to this decision. I would also like to thank the implication of Christian Delhomme, Secretary General, and his team for the wonderful efforts they have given to the organization of this event. We can say that this event is quite unique. There is also an international dimension that is needed when we think about a more sustainable tourism industry
un secteur qui se développe
that
parce que nous
places
avons une
tourism
non
in Nîmes as
depuis 2 millénaires. Nîmes
a
était
topic for
un
which
pôle
we
de
have
tourisme
valuable
commercial
expertise.
aujourd'hui
For
touristique.
over a millennia, Nîmes has been at the
Commercial et
crossroad of
touristique.
commercial and touristic
Provence et
roads,
Languedoc,
at halfway
côté
between Spain and
Méditerranée,
Italy,
notre
between
site
the
d'événements
province,
ponctué. Le
Savannah,
tourisme
and the
représente
Mediterranean.
pour notre commune
Tourism and its
un
development
des fils rouges qui guide mon action
for our
municipale depuis
city
plus de 20
are
ans.
one of the red
Le
threads
tourisme
of the
culturel
municipal
sert
action and have
également
been
une
for over 30
dynamique
years with cultural
économique
tourism,
très
thanks
satisfaisante,
to
comme en témoigne le
an
chantier Tourisme à
old
5
and
mètres
valuable
de nos arènes.
historical heritage, as
Ou
the
encore récemment
renovation works
renouvelé
in
il y
the
a
arena are
1 an
proving it.
que la Maison Carrée candidate de la France à l'inscription du patrimoine mondial à l'UNESCO en 2023.
And now other monuments
Déjà
have been
remarqué.
inscribed
Et dans
to
l'avenir,
the
le tourisme
UNESCO
culturel clé à la
heritage.
construction du futur
And
palais
we
du
want to
congrès.
set ourselves in the
Pour cette raison,
future
nous avons choisi de
with the
donner à
construction
Nîmes
of the
une
new
dimension
Congress
haute
Hall
envergure.
as a business destination.
Grâce
Therefore,
à
you
cette
can well
investissement
understand
solennel
that
dans
it's
le
a very
tourisme durable
important
face à un défi
tourism
non négligeable et aussi à des
city
ambitions pour les années à venir.
because of its history and
Et
its
après des mois de
ambitions
crise
for the
sanitaire dans un
future.
contexte international
After months of sanitary
consacré à nos
crisis
déplacements dans certaines régions du monde, nous devons réfléchir
and where we weren't allowed to travel, now we need to
à
turn
ce
back
que ce
towards the
forum
future of
puisse avoir un rôle
tourism. This
en
is the
lien avec
goal
la ville de
of
Nîmes
this
et ses
forum,
partenaires locaux, la région
with a
Occitanie,
strong
le
link with
codépartemental
Nîmes,
et
its
avec
local partner,
l'agglomération
Region
Nîmes
Occitania,
métropole.
region of Caen,
La Maison
and the
Carrée est un
agglomeration
véritable
of
honneur
Nîmes
de vous recevoir.
metropolis. Therefore, it is a
Le
true
panel de
honor
discussion
to welcome
organisé
you
aujourd'hui
here.
est plus
The
qu'impressionnant.
panels that will
J'espère que
address
nos
you is more than
auditeurs
impressive,
partiront de Nîmes avec un souvenir impérissable
and I
et une
hope you
vision
will
durable
leave
pour l'avenir.
Nîmes with wonderful
Pour le
memories
tourisme,
and durable
avec ce
solutions
thème,
for
nous
the
avons une
future.
approche plus respectueuse
Sustainable
de
tourism
l'environnement
can
et des
bring a
libertés
more
des citoyens.
respectful approach to the environment as
Dans ce
well
sens,
as
avec la population
humans who
accueillie
inhabit our
aujourd'hui à
planets.
Nîmes. Ainsi, le tourisme durable, c'est aussi
Therefore,
respecter les
sustainable
traditions,
tourism
les
means
valeurs,
respecting
l'identité et
traditions,
même une langue, une culture,
values,
une histoire.
a language, a
Avant de donner la
culture,
parole, je donne la
a
précision que Nîmes
history.
est à l'avenir tout à fait
And I would
favorable
like
à
to say that
pérenniser
Nîmes has a
ce
very
forum.
favorable future
Grâce
when
aux
it
conditions
comes
pour
to
obtenir un
making this
cadre
forum
des congrès
a
respectueux
long-standing agreement.
des bâtiments
I
de
hope
notre
that in
ville et
2023 we'll
mettre
be
en phase
able to
avec l'ambition
organize
durable
it in our new
de
Congress Hall, a
je vous remercie
high-tech
de votre attention.
and beneficial building for the environment. Thank you very much for listening.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I want Mrs. Muriel Abadi, the Vice President of the region, to join me on stage. Muriel Abadi, yes. So, and yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Maya. Thank you very much. So, Muriel Abadi, you can have a seat just by me. And Excellencies, Madame Vice President of Occitanie, Mr. Maya, ladies and gentlemen, I am more than happy to welcome you for our second Award for Travel Forum here in Nîmes, in Occitanie, France. To our virtual delegates and to the students from universities all over the world, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Bonjour, bon après-midi et bonsoir.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
Made it possible to establish a baseline of where the travel industry sat collectively vis-à-vis sustainability, and to closely echo to messages for climate challenges laid out by COP26 and the Glasgow Declaration. We had a group of 350 people in Évora, Portugal, and were welcomed by Madam Secretary of State, dear Rita Marques. We are missing you. I know your flight has been cancelled. It's live. And nearly, we had 60,000 attended virtually at this event last year. and with an audience that reached more than 18 million via the media. And why such a success? Yes, of course, we were anxious to meet again after the pandemic lockdowns and travel bans. But the real reason was that everyone had come to realize that the solutions for transforming travel and tourism are not just tucked away within sectors of our industry, and even less in a single country. Obviously, we note an increasing awareness and even that actions proliferate. This is good. But the need for speed is even greater. And this year, with the academic rigor of Roland Berger, our consulting group, we will take stock of the 5 urgent acts defined last year and see how we need to respond. I want to thank all of you who have responded to the survey we sent them. In the meantime, some crises have accelerated. The climate crisis abounds with weather disasters and heat waves all over the world. The energy crisis demands us to find ways to a carbon-free and energy sovereign position. An economic crisis signaled by the return of inflation, forgotten until we see the effects on our production systems and our consumption habits. And finally, the horrific geopolitical crisis of war in the Ukraine. I'd like to make a special welcome to Mrs. Yulia Zuska and Mrs. Yulia Sosyukina from Kharkiv City with us today, and to the Honorable Andrei Moskalenko, Deputy Mayor of Lviv, who took time to participate in this event virtually. True examples of courage and dedication to travel despite the circumstances. I want you to applaud them warmly. And thank you for coming. So, we are aware of the urgency, yes. We are conscious of our responsibility, yes. We know we need transformation, yes. But, dear friends, the time for action has long since come. Here in this magnificent city of Nîmes, in this beautiful region of Occitanie, in the country which is the number one destination in the world, we know what history delivers in terms of tremor and fragility. It isn't only the planet that is asking us to act. It is all of humanity. A World for Travel 2022 is therefore entirely action-oriented. It is in this forum we hope to challenge you to think further and wider. Action is not a great mythical, distant and hypothetical thing. Hic et nunc in Latin, that was said 2,000 years ago, right here in Nîmes. It is here and now. Every step, big or small, is necessary. Among all the components of sustainable transformation we cover this year, we concentrate on 2 of them which are not discussed regularly: the social or human impact and the economic impact of not being sustainable. Human impact, what is it? Why do employees not return or stay to the travel sector? Why salaries are not competitive? Why working conditions are the last thought for many? The demand by communities for respect and consideration of their identity and their economies, their need for more control, and above all, the need for everyone, from our businesses to travelers, who through their behaviors are the key to transformation. From the economic aspect, the impact of our business model raises a question of sustainability. How does the industry access funding? How invest in sustainable solutions? How where do we look to fund this transformation? We must take both of a top-down and bottom-up approach, a 360-degree view. The public and private sector must operate in coordination with each other. But more than that, we must harness the knowledge we have across sectors to drive solutions that bring investment and ensure profitability. We must question, as I said, our business models, constantly trying to lower costs and prices, reducing margins, and relying on volume. It isn't sustainable. I ask you to take the time while you are here in Nîmes to contemplate how else we can operate. Ladies and gentlemen, dear delegates, these are some of the issues we must tackle, both in scope and intensity. As I said last year, the sustainable transformation of this travel sector is lagging behind, but there has been a noticeable upturn in activity, which proves that our industry can adapt, can transform, and can continue to be crucial to the inhabitants of the planet. I thank all our partners that made this forum possible. I thank all of you who have shared your wisdom in its preparation. And I want to give a special thanks to the Resilience Council, our ally for this forum, dear Minister Bartlett, co-chair of the Council, and Duncan Horton, CEO of GMG, stalwartly supporting its activity. And last but not least, Frederic Van Loot, CEO and founder of Eventis Media Group, and I, we are very grateful for everyone's support from the public sector as from the private sector. Thank you. I therefore declare this second edition of Award of Travel open. Merci beaucoup. And now I want to introduce, I have introduced Muriel Abadi, Vice President of the region. We are not here because we are inhabitants of the region. Because I am inhabitant of the region. We're here on purpose. On purpose because Occitanie is an example. So we want to hear more about this exemplarity. Mrs. Vice President?
Merci, Monsieur Delhomme. Mesdames et messieurs,
Thank you very much, Mr. Delhomme. Ladies and gentlemen,
nous quitter. Monsieur le secrétaire général, Christian
as the
Delhomme,
mayor of Nîmes was leaving, the Secretary General Christian Delhomme, Mr. President of the Regional Committee of Mediterranean, Vincent Garel, ladies and gentlemen, I am very happy to be here with you today.
l'absence de notre
Please
présidente
forgive the absence of our President, Carol Delga, that had planned on coming, but however had a major emergency that prevents her from being here with us today. And please believe me, she is very saddened by her absence. It would have been a true honor and pleasure to be here with you all.
avec cette journée World for Travel.
It is true, today with this World for Travel Day, we will think, ponder, discuss experiences from different countries, different origins, different perspectives, and so we need to think about new models, and it's important. So thank you for organizing this second edition, and thank you as well for organizing it in Occitania. As you said, Occitania is a wonderful region. Nîmes is a beautiful city, so rich in culture and history, that has a stellar and bright future, I believe, in the region Occitania. Again, a very tourism-driven region, a first tourism destination. So thank you on behalf of all the inhabitants of Occitania for choosing our region. I was talking about models, and we need to realize today that the world is entering into a very transformational phase. It is the end of a model, the model that thought about tourism in terms of infrastructure and building, but when it comes to the scope and weight of our sector. Today, we all realize that we need a change in paradigm. New references are needed so that we can build a tourism sector where producing value becomes more important than volumes. Tourism of the future can happen only if we find the right balance by seeking consensus. Tourism for everyone, sustainable tourism, attractiveness, quality of life, tourism and inhabitants of a territory of quality equipment, and protection of landscape and biodiversity. The region Occitania has started already a very important transition, has done so for a number of years. In 2020, Carol de Vida had signed and committed in the Green Deal for Occitania as a red thread for her policies, a very strong commitment that makes us consider every single person, and we always try to act in accordance with environmental protection, and we want to listen to the diversity of every single inhabitant of our territory. Our Green Deal is a translation of the regional ambition to seek a green transition by creating a more just and a solidarity-based region. We have our oxygen card that was sold over 30,000 times this year that allows um, the poorest households to enjoy outdoor activities. These incentive measures promote a soft traveling also through our train railway system and grid and the Leo tickets that were sold this summer, almost 900,000 tickets during the summer, and these imply net zero carbon transportation, as well as promoted public transportation economy in our whole territory. Parallel to them, we have understood in Occitania that it is not important to receive awards and to be recognized. We are no longer in the dimension of competition, we are in the dimension of cooperation, co-construction, togetherness. And this is how we have created our new railroad for tourism, with co-construction, with collaborations, with different stakeholders. And these were the key words during our regional meetings. There were many meetings in the 13 departments of the region Occitania. I think it is clear that in Occitania, we want to have a virtuous tourism, a tourism that drives sense, a tourism sector that is a shared capacity by all stakeholders, all professional stakeholders. And as a conclusion, it is clear that our region has committed to a progress plan based on employment, access tourism for the biggest part of the population, and in seeking a new balance for our territory, a responsible, sustainable, and shared future. Thank you.
Merci, Madame la Vice-Présidente, chère Muriel.
Thank you, Madam Vice President.
We were wrong by choosing Occitanie because Occitanie is an example. I also want to give the apologize and the warm welcome from the minister, the French minister. You know, she had got the COVID and she wasn't able either to come or to address a virtual or a video because she's not well, but she's supporting this event and wanted really to be here. So now it's time to hand over to Peter Greenberg. You know, Peter is somebody who you know very well. He's one of the most prominent travel editor all over the world. We hear and we'll listen to your podcast, to your radio. Peter, the stage is yours now.
Thank you, Kristen. Appreciate it. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the World for Travel, our second edition. And as Christian mentioned earlier, last year at this time, we were in Portugal, hosted by their Minister, Secretary of Tourism, Rita Marquez. As Christian also mentioned, she is also unable to be here in person today because her flight was first delayed, then canceled. What a surprise in the world of aviation, a flight canceled and delayed. It is the nature of things in the year 2022, and even though airline on-time performance and reliability may not be improving, sustainability and the dedication to sustainability is not, I think we're all in agreement, is non-negotiable. So welcome virtually my friend and the Honorable Secretary of Tourism for Portugal, Rita Marquez. Rita, the stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Peter. Bonjour, bonjour. C'est un grand plaisir d'être avec vous.
Good morning, everyone. It is a true pleasure to be here with you.
J'ai été informée que mon vol avait été
While I was in
annulé
the airport, I was told that my flight was cancelled. This is why I couldn't be here with you today. I apologize. We're still living through uncertain times.
Mais merci de m'accueillir à cet événement très important.
But thank you for welcoming me here to this event. It's very important. It has the utmost importance in our tourism sector.
I'll move to English. I just wanted to say that I'm really, really sorry I could not be with you today. As Peter has said, we are living in certain times, and that's the reason why I'm not with you today. I do believe that this event is truly important for the sector, for all the sector, and so I thank you. I thank Christian, I thank Frédéric, I thank Vice the NIM for that has organized everything for this wonderful event. And that has been said before, it's quite important for the sector and allow us to think outside of the box and to think about the challenges that we need to embrace. I just want to share a couple of messages from Portugal, from our experience. What can we do in order to be more sustainable? What can we do to have a better tourism for everyone? More than a challenge, I would say this is the way. This is the way we should do business. There is no other way. So more than a challenge, more than an issue, more than a problem, this is the way we have to do business. Otherwise, there really won't be any business in a couple of years. Our raw material is the planet. So if we don't nurture the planet, if we don't pamper it, if we don't respect it, then we'll have an issue, a big issue, and no tourism will come up. No sustainable tourism will come up, that's for sure. And so basically what I want to say to you is that in Portugal, we have a strategy for sustainability. We need to act, and that's why we have been developing a public policy in order to grant us more competitiveness, more sustainability in the tourist destination, Portugal as a tourist destination. And we do believe that this, as I was telling you, this can give you as a competitive edge, let's say, like that. So more than a challenge, it's a kind of solution. It's a kind of a way to do better business. So exactly what we have been doing. So basically, we have been developing 3 or 4 axes of activity. So first of all, we are trying to structure an increasingly sustainable offer. So the goal here is to ensure that the sector really takes swift and effective environmental efficiency measures. And so we are adapting our legislation. We are structuring new products. We are structuring new tourism offer, aligning always through the principles of sustainability. And basically, the main objective here is to ensure that the positive impact of tourism really is visible on communities, on local communities, reducing, of course, regional asymmetries. Because when we talk about sustainability, we are talking about environmental sustainability, but also social sustainability. It's quite crucial, as it has been said before, to embrace local communities. And so basically in this first axis, what we are trying to do is to, as I was saying, is to revise the tourism establishment law We are including sustainability requirements for new tourist uses in all the rules that apply to tourism. We are including sustainability criteria for the attribution or financing support. For instance, if you want to put a new hotel, a new company related to tourism in Portugal, you have to comply with very strict sustainability criteria. And so not only the law has been changing, but also the financing schemes have been changing in order to adapt to adapt to this new reality that we are facing. But I said that we are working with 4 axes. So this is the first one. The second one deals with training, because we need to qualify the tourism sector, and so we need to ensure that training is there for all the professionals that work in the sector, but also for future professionals, because they are agents of change, they are agents of transformation. And so basically what we are doing, because we do manage a huge network of schools in Portugal that rely on the National Tourism Board, what we are doing is that we are including mandatory courses related to sustainability in all our programs. So basically we are educating for sustainability, we are educating for circular economy, we are trying to empower business to meet these new demands, the planet's demands in terms of sustainability. And during the pandemic, we managed to train 180,000 people, because we launched online courses through our digital academia. There is a digital platform you can enroll, by the way, so it's free of charge. Some courses are in English, a great number of courses are in English, so you can apply if you are willing to take that benefit. And so here the second axis of our action plan deals with people, because, as I said, they are agents of transformation. And so what we are trying to do here is to train the sector, but not only leaders, not only the businessmen and women, not only the workers, the tourists themselves. And we do have some good messages also provided in online that could change behaviors, and that's why the second axis it's really important. We are also working with young kids, so basically we are going to the primary schools, trying to train them, educate them towards a more sustainable world, and this has been a huge, I would say, project, and with a huge impact across all society, I would say. The third axis is pretty much about measuring. So we cannot talk about sustainability if we are not able to monitor it, right? So basically what we have defined a laundry list of metrics that relate, of course, energy efficiency, that relate to single use of plastics, a gender balance, because again, social sustainability is really important. Women roles in the middle management levels or upper management levels in the company. So we have put together a laundry list of metrics, and we are monitoring them. So there is a public dashboard where all the companies in the sector here in Portugal can upload their metrics, and they can understand what's their position towards other competitors. And so we have been working on this in a very, I would say, energetic way, producing not only knowledge about sustainability, and we do have, of course, a platform for co-production of knowledge in the field of tourism with a huge network of regional observatories, for instance, but also, as I was saying, provide the means for the company to report their performance indicators, their performance metrics, and be able to compare their position with their competitors. Because at the end of the day, competition is really, positive. So if we instigate competition, if we promote competition, I think companies will have more incentives to move forward and to embrace sustainability as a goal. And what type of metrics, so what type of objectives do we have? So for instance, we have nowadays in Portugal 50% of our tourism establishments, of our hotels, have, for instance, energy efficiency and water and waste efficiency management systems. 50%, around that number, around that figure. So basically what we are trying the companies to do is that we have to increase this goal, and by 2023 we want a 50% increase in this number, for instance. That means that we are financing also good projects in order to attain this objective. This is valid not only for energy efficiency, water and waste management systems, but also applicable to single use of plastics, for instance. The clean and safe label, we have launched that during the pandemic. I think we were the first countries in the world to launch such a clean, safe label that has more than 25,000 members nowadays. And so this type of indicators, this type of metrics are really important to push for competition and to report and monitor what's going on. And the fourth axis is about promotion. So we are trying to sell the country as one of the most competitive, sustainable destinations. This implies that we have to include this message, everything that deals with our promotion action plan. We have to include this message and content about Portugal as a sustainable tourist destination in all our communication strategy. And so we have been including messages and content on sustainability, on sustainability mobility, for instance, namely railways. We have been pushing hard to guarantee that people understand that Portugal is very much focused on training people and also, for instance, giving the need for us to find our own interior, meaning that we have been promoting tourist operations in the mainland of Portugal, in the interior regions. And so this type of sustainable message is really important in order to maintain cohesion and among the sector. And that's pretty much the message that I would like to convey to you. At the end of the day, no matter if you have the right strategy, the solution, I would say the secret sauce here is to involve everybody. So that's pretty much what we are trying to do. We are trying to involve the tourist operators, that's the companies, the leaders of those companies, the workforce, 300,000 people work in the tourism sector in Portugal. So that's huge, huge number of agents for transformation. The tourists themselves, because they have a role to play here. The locals, that's the residents, the Portuguese people also have a message to convey. So I would say that secret sauce here is not really to have a strategy with all these four axes, but most of all is to have everyone involved, making them aware that this is not a challenge. This is the way to act. This is the way, basically. So thank you again for all the attention, all the best, and I'll stay tuned in order to get your reaction and all the inputs that you will disclosure with us during this event. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Secretary Marques. And Rita, thank you for sharing the secret sauce. And also, when you talk about regulation, behavior changing, education, and of course, diversity, that's part of the mix. It just can't be a sustainability message. It has to be a sustainability vision that everybody embraces. We look forward to joining you in person soon, hopefully either in Portugal or somewhere else around the world. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you. Bye-bye.
You got it. We have some welcoming messages I'd like to share with you. some virtual, some in person. So let's start off from the UN Office of Disaster Risk Reduction, the director, Paola Albrito.
Bonjour, Nim, Excellencies, distinguished speakers and participants, leaders and decision makers, greetings from Geneva. It is a pleasure to contribute to this conversation on how to go beyond advocacy to build a travel industry that is inclusive, resilient, and sustainable. The Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development and the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, which aims to prevent the creation of new risk, reduce existing risk, and invest in resilience, provide a solid roadmap to build upon. One clear message from these frameworks is that while states have the primary responsibility for sustainable development, this is a shared responsibility with other stakeholders. So to fulfill this all-of-society approach, where the private, public sector, civil society, and local community are included, we need two fundamental shifts. The first one is for all sectors and stakeholders to actively engage, take actions, and invest resources to demonstrate commitments, knowledge, and experience in building a resilient and sustainable future. The how and the what are specified in the Sustainable Development Goals and the Sendai Framework for Action. But the overall message is to do it by breaking a silo approach that is a damaging reality. The second is a mindset shift from a short-term perspective towards a think resilience, long-term approach in all forms of private and public sector investment. Why? Why is very painfully evident, and the road ahead is really challenging. UNDRR recent global assessment report on disaster risk reduction foresees a 40% increase in the number of disasters, moving from an average of 400 disasters a year in 2015 to 560 per year in 2030. These disasters are expected to be increasingly larger and more expensive. If we allow them to happen, there will be more humanitarian needs, more displacement, more destruction. Yet, when government and the international community align, visionary businesses and investors are able to anticipate future challenges and potentially stay ahead of the market. It does pay back, this approach. The travel and tourism sector play an important role at the economic, social, environmental, and cultural levels. Your role in a country's sustainable and resilient development is therefore critical. The tourism sector is close to the people who are exposed and suffer the most from disasters. You also have a built understanding of the factors that influence individual behavior and decision-making in situations of high uncertainty, such as in the context of natural hazards. This is a truly fertile ground for designing and implementing sustainable long-term tourism strategies that are inclusive. Your voice, experiences, and engagement are of great value for the policymakers. In May this year, the high-level thematic debate on sustainable and resilient tourism was led by the President of the 76th General Assembly, who reminded member states of the urgent need to put sustainability and resilience at the heart of the tourism activities as the sector rebounds from COVID-19. It underlines that sustainable tourism solutions include 1. Multidisciplinary, multisectoral, and community-based approaches. 2. Enhancing community participation and promoting inclusive and accessible tourism. This includes also persons with disability. 3. Harnessing digital technology and innovation along the entire tourism value chain. 4. Strengthening health measures, supporting efforts to address the climate emergency. 5. Strengthening social protection for workers. And 6. Facilitating financial support, private-public partnership, investments in critical infrastructure, training, and capacity building. The road is very well set. We need to continue to collaborate and to innovate to reduce risk and create a sustainable world. As you move forward on this path, I want to let you know that you're not alone. There are platforms such as UNDRR Private Sector Alliance for Disaster Resilient Society, so-called ARISE, where you can join more than 400 like-minded firms that are committed to resilience building. In addition, UNDRR provides practical guidance and tools for implementing the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, together with partners and member states. For example, the principle for resilient infrastructure, endorsed by over 100 countries, that helps guide policymakers to integrate resilience as a core value in planning and implementation of infrastructure projects, which could be of benefit to hotel, supply chain, and critical services resilience necessary for a sustainable tourism sector. Please do count on the support of UNDRR as we recognize the importance of travel and tourism sector for enhancing the sustainable development and community and nation. So thank you ahead for your engagement.
Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us. I think it's somewhat ironic but important to note that the director of the UN Office of Disaster Risk Reduction is reporting and predicting a 40% increase in those disasters. The reason why I think we're here today to jointly search for those solutions together. So thank you very much for joining us.
Pleasure to be with you.
Now, moving on, a message from the United Nations World Tourism Office. May I invite to the stage the Special Advisor to the UNWTO, Michel Durier.
Well, hello. Let me first wish a prompt recovery to our Minister Olivia Grégoire. Ministers, Deputy Ministers, Madame Vice President Muriel, chers collègues, WTTC Chairman and CEO Christian Delon is here, Secretary General of World for Travel, Mr. Deputy Mayor and Mayor, I don't know if they are still there, leaders of sector companies, organizer, Frédéric Van Hout, from CEO Eventis, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor for me to represent Zurab Polilikashvili today, Secretary General of United Nations World Tourism Organization. He asked me to excuse him for not being able to be personally present and to convey to you all his gratitude in these few words. Tourism continues to recover steadily, but several challenges remain, from geopolitical and economics. We know that sector brings hope and opportunity to people around the world, but also know that it's time to rethink tourism, where it's going and how it impacts people and the planet. We must be the actors of this transformation. If we want to answer the right transformation of tourism in a sustainable way, its development must be designed to serve the prosperity and well-being of the populations, of the destination and the environments. The development and the number of tourists is not an objective itself. Observatories are an excellent way to guide and support this change and to enable decision-making bases on data and concrete examples. To do this, we must consolidate our information, but we must not forget to exchange our experiences. In this regard, I would like to thank World for Travel for the work done to bring together during these 2 days both the private and public sectors, ministers, CEOs, experts, and the media from all over the world. People must be at the center of our development. The commitment and respect of the population to build responsible tourism is the key to our success. Economic growth cannot be considered otherwise. The social, the environmental, and the economic form part of our DNA. UNWTO supports governments and the sector to understand the challenges of tomorrow and provides the elements to build the transformation strategies to be implemented. Finally, I would like to thank Christian Delon for his personal commitment and his ability to bring us together, like today here in Nîmes, the city of history and tourism. I would like also to thank Michel Durieux for agreeing to represent me today. He advised me on the issues of sustainable tourism and territorial development. He is a great professional at the service of destination and the sector. On several occasions, he was able to make me discover the treasures of his country, and in particular the south of France, from Occitanie to Nouvelle-Aquitaine, from the Mediterranean Sea to the Atlantic coast via his native Pyrenees. I wish you excellent work and meetings during these 2 days, and have no doubt that we will meet again soon in the future conferences or committees of UNWTO. Thank you very much.
And now 2 special messages of welcome to you from the World Travel and Tourism Council. First, the chairman, Arnold Donald, and the CEO, Julia Simpson. I direct your attention to the screen.
Hello, it's great to join you today, even though I can't be with you in person. Speaking to a group of the most innovative and exciting leaders in travel today is indeed for me a privilege. As you all know, travel and tourism are the backbone to economies around the world. Thanks to each of you, collectively, our sector supports millions of jobs. And as we've all experienced, it's not always easy. The past 2 years have been devastating for our sector. But as is often the case, there is light at the end of the tunnel. The world is traveling again. And over the next decade, WTTC research shows that we are on a trajectory for our sector to create nearly 126 million jobs worldwide. Now that is a huge prize worth reaching for. But if there is one thing the pandemic has reminded us of, is this: the great challenges of our age are shared, and we cannot tackle them alone. The world is smaller than ever. People, goods, and ideas flow across borders more so than ever before in history. We are deeply interconnected, and it's no longer enough for our leaders, or frankly for any of us, to work in isolation. Today's problems demand much closer collaboration. It's true for health, it's true for travel, and it's certainly true for climate action. Carbon emitted in one part of the world can cause tragic climate effects like devastating floods and forest fires on the opposite side of the globe. We must work together. And I don't just mean politicians. All of us in the travel and tourism sector also need to show leadership. Working together, let's put sustainability at the heart of everything we do. Acting in unison, collaborating, we can achieve great things. Travel and tourism is uniquely positioned to protect and to restore nature. We are her guardians. With initiatives such as WTTC's Net Zero Roadmap, as Julia has been sharing in her travels around the globe, the first ever sector-wide net zero blueprint addressing carbon emissions, sustainability, and biodiversity. And there was fantastic news that came last month from Montreal at the UN Aviation Agency's 39th Assembly. An historic agreement was made in aviation for a new global mechanism to control CO2 emissions, the first agreement of its kind. These examples bring me real hope for our future. Clearly, sustainability is non-negotiable. Our sector depends on it. Our children's future world depends on it. Together, let's lead by example. As you know, I spent the last 9 years as president and CEO of Carnival Corporation and PLC. We're the largest cruise company in the world with brands you know well: Carnival, Holland America, Princess, Seabourn, Costa, P&O, Cunard, AIDA, and P&O Australia. Now, recently, having stepped down as president and CEO, I now serve as vice chairman of our board. Our cruise lines sail the world in enormous and majestic ships that are so spectacular, they boggle the mind. And even though our impact on the planet is almost immeasurable, we too have committed to doing our part, leading the industry with ships fueled by cleaner LNG, and joining an industry commitment to pursue net carbon neutral cruising by 2050 and reduce emissions by 40% by 2030. Now, we've made numerous progress on multiple fronts, having peaked in absolute carbon emissions way back in 2011, despite having grown guest capacity since that time by more than 30%. It is an opportunity, and it is our collective responsibility as a sector to create change. Again, as the travel and tourism sector, we can lead the way. For the people of the world, let's take responsibility for our planet. Let's take the climate change challenge as an opportunity to once again be a catalyst for change and making our world a better place. I'm looking forward to everything we will achieve together. Thank you.
Bonjour. It's great to be talking to you again at the World Travel Forum. When I was with you last year,
Bonjour. Et c'est
by the power of the work that you are doing to put resilience and sustainability, our two most critical issues, at the very top of the travel and tourism agenda. I always remind everybody that before the pandemic, travel and tourism represented 10% of the contribution to the global economy, and it also represented 1 in 4 new jobs. But we are more than statistics. Travel is a portal. It connects families, friends and colleagues. It opens us to the world, to new languages and cultures, and it has shrunk the globe in a way that was unimaginable just a few generations ago. For all these reasons, we want our sector to last, but there is no denying that we face some big challenges. Continued fallout from the COVID pandemic, China has still yet to open, rising conflicts, economic headwinds, and perhaps the defining issue of our age, climate change. 50% of global GDP relies on and depends on nature. As an industry, we are existentially threatened by extreme heat and rising seas, and ours is one of just 6 economic sectors with over 80% of its goods and services highly dependent on the natural world. That is why we must also be part of this solution. But how do we even begin to tackle a problem of such overwhelming magnitude? Well, I always remember an old saying that no one can whistle a symphony, it takes a whole orchestra. And that's never more true than in sustainability, than probably than any other area facing humankind. This issue is bigger than just one company. It's bigger than one industry. It's a system-wide challenge, and solving it will take collaboration on a massive scale. Business and government, public and private, and partnership within our sector too. Our tour operators, travel agents, destination managers, cruise lines, hotel owners, airlines, airports, and many more, all coming together united with a shared goal. So at the WTTC, we have worked to do exactly that. Last year for COP26, we produced the first ever sector-wide net zero roadmap for travel and tourism. It brought the whole industry together under one umbrella, and it has been endorsed by the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Then, in April this year, we launched our Hotel Sustainability Basics. These are a globally coordinated set of actions that any hotel, however small, can take on, and it will help them begin their sustainability journey. It has since been supported by more than 60 hotel associations representing more than 50,000 hotels, and that really is just the beginning. And now, as we approach the UN's next biodiversity conference called COP15, the WTTC has launched a new report on nature-positive travel and tourism. It's part evidence, part manifesto, setting out the ideas and practical actions companies can take to become guardians of nature. And it's also a toolkit for companies of any size in any country to help them assess their individual impact on nature and enable them to take action. This landmark agenda is the first of its kind in the sector, bringing together businesses, climate scientists, and biodiversity, as well as, importantly, the policymakers, the people sitting in governments making the rules. They need to play their part in the upcoming UN Summit on Biodiversity, all with the support from WTTC members and the Convention on Biological Diversity. At the heart of all this work is one simple thing: collaboration. It's why events like this are so critically important. They enable cross-sector dialogue and candid, open debate, public and private coming together, and they put sustainability at the top of the agenda. Now all that remains is action. So after this conference, when you sit down back at your desk on Monday morning, I urge every one of you, no matter your size, sector or role, to ask yourself a simple question: what's my next sustainability journey? And together I know we can take those crucial next steps to sustain our planet so that our planet in turn can sustain us. Merci beaucoup. Thank you to all.
Okay, if I can ask for the lights to come down, we're going to go to the Egypt section, and we're going to first see a video. Actually, while we're waiting, I might as well tell you. I'm going to just tell you this much. As a travel show presenter, I have been to Egypt many times. I have looked particularly at Luxor and the Valley of the Kings. The country is absolutely fascinating to me. It's the richest heritage that you'll ever find in terms of history, and it's becoming very sustainable, as we're about to find out. But first, let's go to the video.
You think you know who first invented the mirror you look at every morning? Makeup that highlights your beauty. The sandwich you take with you everywhere. Perfume that gives you character. The calendar you'd be lost without. Prosthetics that complete you. The flute that moves your emotions. Paper and ink for documenting history. It doesn't end there. Writing tools, measuring tools, surgical tools, and even mathematics that gives you the power of knowledge. Who do you think pioneered all of this? It all began with one civilization. The same civilization that introduced grand architectures, astronomy, and even the oldest peace treaty. The list goes on and on and on. This is the Egyptian civilization, a civilization so great that a science was created after it. For the past 200 years, Egyptology revealed countless secrets and discoveries of more than 5,000 years of history. and more is yet to come. This is Egyptology, 200 years of science in the making.
Now, not only are there amazing innovations when it comes to the preservation of heritage, but also Egypt, as you well know, is hosting COP27. I think it's next week, isn't it? It's very soon. And I want to welcome on stage now, and I'm delighted that she is here, to welcome Her Excellency Ghada Shalabi, the Vice Minister, Arabic Republic of Egypt, who will share with us now an update on COP27, but also follow that with an overview of the cultural and historical developments that are basically ensuring Egypt's destination sustainability, and that goes from community engagement to economic diversity. Your Excellency. Thank you. Have a seat. Let's sit here, shall we? Yep. Are you comfortable? Now then, I should say, just to explain about COP. So the 2022 United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, more commonly referred to as COP27, will be the 27th session of the Conference of the Parties to the UNFCCC, held, and I was right, it is next week, November the 6th, to the 18th, 2022. It takes place in Egypt's coastal city, which many of you will know, Sharm el-Sheikh, and the conference builds on the momentum from last year's iteration, COP26. So let's just start with basics, Your Excellency, because I think there's still a lot of people who don't really know what COP27 is about. So can you explain that for us, please? Yes, please use the microphone, yeah. Let's just check it's on. Yes, very good. It is.
Great. Well, good morning, everyone, and a warm welcome from the land of the Egyptologists and Egyptian civilization. Happy to be with you today, and many thanks for all the organizers and everyone who has put this event today and last year as well. It was a great success, and I wish you all the best for a continued success as well. Well, COP27 is where all the leaders, they come together in one arena, where the land of Sharm el-Sheikh will become a UN territory managed by the UN agency, bringing all those leaders. Over than 120 leaders will be joining up in Sharm el-Sheikh next week, talking about climate change, the most important subject that we're talking about, and keeping our destinations, our country, our planet healthy, breathing, and sustainable for our lives, for our generations, for our grandchildren to be able to enjoy it as we've enjoyed it as well. And the changes that we're facing now with global warming affecting the sea levels, affecting your beautiful ski resorts, will be, demolished if we don't really take an action, if those world leaders does not take an action. And why this is important, because of what we've been seeing nowadays. With the war effects, with the warm weather, I wouldn't expect that Nîmes at this time of the year would be that warm. It's as close as in Cairo, which I didn't really expect that, this warmth. So it's the chance that we have to move from promises, from talks into actions, bringing all those world leaders to agree on one action plan to be put together and come with, actionable decisions.
You mentioned a couple of travel-related things there. How much is travel part of the agenda of COP27?
Well, this event is led by two entities, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and affiliation with the United Nations, and also the Ministries of Environment. But being held in a touristic city, Sharm el-Sheikh, the most beautiful, loved city for all nature lovers, tourism has a big part. From our side, as a regulator, the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities, regulating the travel industry, we have a lot of focus on the hotels industry, transforming those hotels into green, sustainable properties, and it's just the journey is starting. It's our commitment as a country to take the sector towards this green and sustainable developments. Not only the hotels, but also the scuba diving activities, all the diving centers, all our tourist guides, all the footprint that will be managed in the city is taking place to become a more sustainable and green initiative. It's a roadmap that has just started, and we're committed. It's our presidency commitment that we are taking place in it and taking this responsibility for.
It's a big deal, isn't it? I mean, it's a huge event.
Is.
The eyes of the world are going to be on Cairo. Just tell me, why did Egypt decide to host this event?
Well, it's after so many years that I think that the UN have seen our commitment and the mega projects that the country has gone through. And you're seeing the statement from President Abdel Fattah Sisi taking this initiative and commitment from the country. And we're taking it also on behalf of Africa. So we're putting Africa on the table, where all the leading countries that perhaps have contributed a lot in the weather change needs to take an action towards saving the planet. A lot of initiatives that needs to be looked at. It's a roadmap that we need to all work on. It's not an individual, and this, just to give you an example, this is St. Catherine. It's in about 100 kilometers north of Sharm el-Sheikh, and it's one of the most beautiful preserved places where three religions have come together in this land. So again, it's the chance to save the livelihoods of the people, of the whole planet. And as I've said, it's a roadmap that after taking decisions and really commitments of the agendas that will be agreed, some finances also has to be taken part of that, you know, because investments has to come on the way to finance and to fund these activities and these changes. So putting Africa on the table, putting the hotel and tourism industry on the table is an important thing that we're bringing next week.
Just to say, I think the African tourism industry, this is the century for, I'm going to say this is the century for Africa. I'm going to Morocco next week where there's a big investment conference, and then later on to Botswana. Africa, I think, is rising. I think that's a brilliant thing. In terms of rising to that sustainability challenge, what does that mean for Sharm el-Sheikh?
These are Sharm el-Sheikh numbers, and as I said, that it's just the journey that has started. So we're changing the solar efficiency work that is taking place either in the hotels or at the airport, using green transportation, buses. We're pushing buses with gas and electrical equipments. However, and maybe the manufacturers needs to focus more on producing buses that is good for tourists, because so far they are not equipped for accommodating luggage for travelers, so it's only for domestic and internal transportation, but yet a lot of work has to be done on this map.
Let's move on now then to Egyptology, to its civilization, to its amazing historical treasures. And there have been developments there in terms of sustainability and both and when I say that, I mean both economic and social, so we're talking about the local community too. But tell me, what are your favorites? Which ones do you think, yeah, I like what's happening here?
Well, we always envy ourselves of the proximity of Egypt. It's in the middle of the world. It's about 3 hours to 4 hours flight from Europe, quite close from Asia, from Middle East. So we're quite central, and this is one of the benefits for all travelers to come to Egypt. Also, we favor ourselves with the climate, 365 days of sunshine, and our new campaign coming up with saying follow the sun, where winter is going to hit hard, and you don't need a lot of energy to get warm, but just sit in the sun. Egypt has a lot of diversified products for tourists, and all are guarding sustainable development and sustainable keeping for tourists, from women empowerment and women products to beach resorts to hiking trips to underwater to archaeological sites. So we have it all in Egypt with a 4 hours flight from here.
So just tell me this then. This, in a sense, is a new Egypt, which is actually showcasing the old Egypt as well as the modern Egypt. So what can, when a tourist comes to Egypt, what can they expect?
Well, what we have here is not only a tourist destination attractions, but also it's how the government is committed towards sustainability. Building this Bimban solar park, it's going to be the biggest in the world, with about 37 kilometers space, producing 1.4 megawatt of electricity. This is one of the mega projects that the country is putting together in the world of sustainability. And if we go to the next slide, next slide. Also another mega project taking place by the Mediterranean Sea, on the other side of France, building El Alamein city. This is one of the most modern cities, sustainable development. Again, it's a touristic city, but also is going to be attractive and attracting tourists all year round, not only for tourists, but also for 365 living with building universities, there are schools, hospitals, so it's not only a tourist attraction city, but also a livelihood one. Also another project by the Red Sea, El Galala city, with the same concept. This is the modern Egypt that we're trying to show the world, building new cities by the sea resorts, attracting tourists, as well as the livelihood of the Egyptians. Another one is the new capital, and the new capital is the size of it equals to Singapore, and is built to accommodate over than 6 million population, and it's almost the size of Denmark. So it's not a city, but it's a country, and this is part of the new Egypt development, again, that is going towards digitization, going towards the modern life, and with an airport, with an Olympic city, with a heritage and culture activities, the new capital, administrative capital, this is what it's going to offer. So these are part of the initiatives and the mega projects that the country is building.
Just finally, Vice Minister, we are talking now about sustainability, and you did just mention it, about sustainability, as we know, is not just about environment, it is also about diversity. It is very much about local communities. True. We are changing the paradigm, in a sense, of tourism to be not so focused on the actual visitor, the consumer, but the host, the people
True.
who you are inviting, the people are inviting you in to their place. So how much is the community now, how much are the local people, how much are they stakeholders in this new vision that you are showing us?
This is another project, this is another initiative that the government is also looking after. It's called Haya Karima, Living with Dignity, that is going to affect almost 60 million people who were under the poverty line. They didn't have the basic necessities of living. And these initiatives is going right to their villages, leveraging their livelihoods and increasing their awareness of the modern life. Not only that, but also we've approached some of these villages where they have a foundation of tourism or archaeological assets, whereby we can train them, we can educate them on how they can welcome tourists, because lots of Egypt is floating on archaeological sites and antiquities. So they can they get educated on how to deal with tourists, and this will bring them upskilling their living conditions and their economical conditions. So this is another initiative that we're
absolutely crucial, isn't it? That local people, communities are now central to what tourism offers. Your Excellency, thank you so much for joining us. As I say, I'm lucky enough, I'm going back to Egypt.
Are you coming for the COP?
For the COP? No, I'm not. I'm going to be there at the same time as the COP. That's going to be interesting, isn't it? But I think I'm going straight to Luxor, so we'll avoid what's going to happen there. But good luck with it. I hope it goes really well.
Thank you.
And can you please give a hand to Madame or Dr.
Thank
Shalom?
you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. In fact, I had a chance to watch the Pharaoh's Parade. Of course, what you didn't see in that video is that it's preluding the actual opening, finally, of the Grand Egyptian Museum. It's next year. Okay, but I've actually had a chance to be in that museum, yes, in the workshops, and to see the restoration work that's being done. You cannot imagine, talk about sustainability, of what they're still finding in Saqqara and what they're still finding in the desert And every day a new sarcophagus comes in. Every day, when I was in the workshops, I saw King Tut's underwear and his bed. Talk about preservation. So I'm very excited about the opening of the gem. Now it's time to talk about the kind of partnership that Her Excellency was just talking about between the private and the public sector in sustainability. And I'm pleased to welcome to the stage Raphael Schwartzman, the Regional Vice President of IATA. Raphael, if you could come up. Gregory Alanta, the Chief Development, Construction, and Property Officer of a company you know well called Club Med. Kata Sisrep, the Managing Partner of Aviation and Travel for ICF. Nicole Sauter, the Global Sustainability Lead for Amex Global Travel. And virtually joining us, Philip Deleur from the Alstrom Group. I hope he'll join us on screen. And I'll let everybody get settled for a second. And go back to what we're really here about today. What you see on the stage here is planes, trains, automobiles, hotels, global distribution, and automobiles. We have everybody represented today, talking about really what we can all do together in our various stages. And is David here? Oh, good, there he is. David from Costa. David, I'm going to start with you, and because we heard from Arnold Donald in his speech about the impact of the cruise industry. Of course, the reputation of the cruise industry and the media when it comes to sustainability has not been a stellar one. Some people might argue that you guys are floating pollution producers. Obviously, in the last couple of years, I've been on a number of cruise ships that finally got the message. They have entire decks devoted to waste management and zero tolerance policies of what can ever leave the ship. It's more than that, it's fuel. We heard Arnold Donald talking about LNG. We're talking about other cruise lines like Norwegian going to methanol. It's radical changing in terms of systems. It's radical changing in terms of the products that you buy, the products that you use. It goes way beyond whether or not you're getting rid of single-use straws. So I'm going to start with you to talk about what you're doing at Costa that not only impacts the cruise industry and the passenger experience, but actually relates to everybody else here on the stage.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. I should say quite common for me to have this kind of start when I have to kind of try to restore a reputation from not just Costa but the cruise industry as a whole.
It's not about restoring it; it's about building it.
Yeah, I try to do my best to do that. I'd like to share with you a couple of considerations, hopefully allowing them to set down for the future. First one is, we're not perfect. Costa is not perfect. Cruise industry is not perfect. We know we still have a long way to go in our sustainability journey. But I think we should consider ourselves as heavily technology limited. I would be thrilled to share with you the fact that we are about to launch a new ship, which is solar powered and which sources on board 100% of the food we serve to our guests. But that technology does not exist. Our industry is heavily limited by human available technology, and we are pushing hard on that. Still, I see cruise industry and Costa, of course, as part of the solution, not as part of the problem. We are, in spite of the fact that we are less than 1% of the global shipping industry, which, by the way, accounts for 2.9% of global CO2 emissions, we've been introducing, for the benefit of the whole global community, technological disruption, which will benefit not only the shipping industry as a whole, but the global community. I'll make you a couple of examples trying to be as concrete as possible. 2018, Costa introduced the world's first LNG power ships. Now 61% of the new building capacity is powered by LNG. This means dramatically bringing down close to zero local emissions and 25% CO2 emissions. 100%, so the totality of the world cruise fleet is equipped with advanced, as you said, wastewater treatment plants. 40% of cruise fleet worldwide, 50% if we look at Costa, is equipped with shore power connection. You know what?
And let me talk about shore power connection for a second, because up until about 10 years ago, if a ship came into a port, They didn't plug into anything. They kept the generators going. They kept the engines going. You see the smoke coming out of the stacks. It started actually in Alaska, where local communities passed ordinances saying you could not come into Alaska unless you literally plugged the ship in to the electric grid. And the technology was available. It was then used. And that's now not only just in Alaska, but now you guys are doing it as well.
That's correct. And that's an excellent example of public-private partnership that need to be improved yet. You know, I mentioned the fact that 40% of global fleet, 50 for Costa, is equipped for that. You know how many ports worldwide are equipped for cold ironing? 29, 2%. So you see the disproportion. We do things, and in absence of public support, enabling, paving the way for us to do things.
Right, but it gets down to availability of fuel as well. If you're going to do LNG fuel, right, it has to be available.
Correct.
It has to be transportable. It has to be available at all those ports.
That is actually an excellent example of how a private and public partnership work very well. When we introduced that, we had to build the world supply chain because it didn't exist. And the only supply we have in Europe, the only place we can bunker our ships is in Barcelona. But local authorities in Italy, for example, are helping us, and we allowed a small LNG tanker to refuel our ship in La Spezia, for example. So this is how, through a collective partnership, we can do that.
Well, Rafael, this goes back to you because when we talk about fuel, we all know, or at least we think we know about SAF, Sustainable Aviation Fuel. It's proven to work. I remember, you know, it's not just about technology and efficiency, it's about availability and cost. So when I was growing up, a color TV set was $2,000. Now you can get one for $99. We know that sustainable aviation fuel works, whether it's biodegradable cooking oil or a combination. So far, they've tested it already on a number of different airlines, Virgin being one, United being another. But now we get to a point of availability, and if you don't have the availability, it becomes cost prohibitive.
Yeah, correct. First of all, yes, it is just to give an example. I mean, today, sustainable aviation fuels, whatever is available is already bought, but the level of availability is 0.1%, right?
Same problem.
So it's a huge problem. There has been already over 450,000 flights that have already used SAF, right? Obviously in a blend. Today the mandate still is maximum 50% possible. Anyway, it costs 2 to 5 times more to use this fuel, right? So imagine it's not economically necessarily feasible for.
Technically, it's provable. Efficiency in terms of economy, we're how many years away?
Well, that's the other thing. Well, I just want to probably bring back what the chairman of WTTC said, which is one very important element, which we're all hoping in the industry, was the agreement was reached at ICAO on the long-term aspirational goals, right? So this is a global agreement to be able actually to, what we expect now is to have the right incentives and the right regulation to be able, and investments, to be able to achieve the production levels that are needed, which are, as we see, today we are very concerned about the accessibility of it, also knowing that by 2050, which is the aspiration to be net zero, different studies, but in general, we're talking about 65% of the offset will be through SAF, right? Unless there is a much bigger breakthrough in technology that we don't know of.
All right, so let me ask you a really silly question, or maybe not. If I went on an airplane today, on any international carrier, and asked any passenger to explain to me their carbon offset, how many could actually do it? I would say maybe none.
It's a very good question, actually, because we're all seeing the drive and that we all have to make an effort to become, sustainable, economically conscious and all that. Most airlines in the world today offer the ability to offset
I
your
know
CO2.
they offer the ability. My question is, what about our educational responsibility to explain to the passengers, the people who are paying the bills for those tickets, what their impact is and what their impact could be?
Yeah, well, in some cases there are. I agree with you. Very few people know, and very few people actually make an effort to offset that. Yet.
Right, you got to make it relatable to their lives, right? And the question is, if they don't know, then they're part of the problem still.
Correct.
And let's go back to Kata here, because it's not just the fuel we're talking about. We're talking about all the other elements that go into air travel and cruise travel too. The supplies that you order, the toxic liquids that you use, right? Even for de-icing, even what you're served as food on the plane. What happens to that, right? So, what initiatives are you doing within your area to, first of all, address it, and as Raphael and I were just talking about, to educate people, both inside and outside, not to mention government regulators, about the need to do stuff?
That's a very complex question.
That's why I'm here.
I know. I'll try not to talk for an hour because there's a lot to touch on. So I'll just pick up on the SAF piece, and I know Nicole's also very active here. But there's a reason that this is what we're going to be talking about, because this is the only near-term solution we have. It is available. I will steal an anecdote or sort of an analogy from one of your former colleagues at IATA who basically demonstrated in a bottle of water, 1 drop is currently what the SAF supply is, and we need the full bottle. That's how short we are. And so at ICF, certainly we're working on closing the gap, and we're doing that through policy work, through feedstock assessments, through education, and actually commercial agreements. We are helping airlines broker deals with producers, doing the matchmaking. We're helping with the communication elements, but it really does come down to the policies. So that's one piece. I absolutely
Can you
agree.
give me one example of what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're doing impact assessments for the European Commission and other agencies. We're looking at studies in the US on the Inflation Reduction Act and its impact on the supply of SAF, how that's impacting producers, and basically help policymakers make informed decisions about what will actually have a difference. And the reason we're able to do that is to this theme of partnerships, is that we at ICF, there's about 9,000 of us, we do public sector and private sector work, and often we're the bridge in between the two, able to communicate what is the commercial reality of somebody trying to produce a fuel or buy a plane. To a policymaker. The other point that I think is really important, and this is another area where we work, is communicating this to the traveler. You're absolutely right. The uptake is abysmal. There's a low level of trust. There's a low level of understanding. If myself don't trust an airline, and I travel, I'm very active in this space, I buy my quality offsets independently rather than through the airline, then that tells you a lot about the general traveling public. So one of the areas we're working with in Europe through the environment or the European Aviation Safety Agency, EASA, is looking at how consumer-facing labels can help communicate. For example, the use of SAF. What is SAF? Can you even visualize what it looks like? What's a ton of CO2? How do you distill something that is really technical to the traveling public so they understand it, they see the importance, and they take action, which is what this is
So
about.
what does a ton of CO2 look like?
It looks like this, and that's what's it's really difficult to come up with a label that resonates with consumers. So the real challenge of developing these schemes, of which many have been tried, is doing something that is technically robust in an industry that is incredibly complex. So you need chemical engineers to understand what's all going into this, to distill it to something my parents would understand. That's a real challenge of partnership when you have all these multiple stakeholders.
And at the same time, this applies to you as well, you can't regulate something if you don't understand it.
Right. And I think this is a fantastic theme for this conference, that many of us in our swim lanes, very expert. And I'm not a cruise expert, but since I've been talking to some people in preparation for this event, the parallels between shipping and aviation are just staggering. The challenges of infrastructure. I have nowhere to charge my plane. I have nowhere to charge my ship. In simple terms, I have nowhere to charge my car. All of the same things. I don't think the lessons are quite being shared enough.
Of course, speaking of charging, we're now seeing the evolution, or the introduction, I should say, of hybrid airplanes, where that technology actually does exist now. I see a number of smaller airlines looking at it in terms of air taxi work. of course, that adds so many other questions to the equation as to where do you park them? Where do you charge them? How does the FAA regulate air traffic at that point if everybody's flying around on a lawnmower that's powered by a battery? I mean, Raphael, what work are you doing in that regard? Because it's coming.
Well, to be honest, yes, it is coming. I think some of the members of IATA already they have already, you have seen some agreements already.
They've invested.
Yes. And also, have already compromised to, for example, you have even cases like in Denmark where they're working towards zero emission flights based on hydrogen and SAF, but these are all what I think the focus today is, the technology that you mentioned, is all on, let's say, short-haul, flights.
Very short-haul.
And very restricted capacity, right? So it does address some of the issues, but overall, this is still very, technology-wise, we're still far from being able, for example, hydrogen is still very early stages, and that's why we keep talking about SAF, right? Because this is at the moment the interim transition process where we need to scale up the production urgently, I would say, right? And while the technology is catching up, the short-haul flights for small distances and small number of passengers will be available. As we know, I was not long ago in Norway. There is this agreement with Widerøe, also with Embraer, for example. Yes, they do all short-haul flights within that region, right? And that could be done very, let's say, in certain time. And we have seen many investments by many airlines in even hydrogen partnerships, right? But these are very long-term, right? We have seen recently, I don't know, Airbus and Delta working on a hydrogen plane and all that. But that's quite far ahead, and that's why we keep coming back to SAF and the need to quickly incentivize, I would say, because we keep using the word regulating, right? And we are still not catching up in production, right? So, and you mentioned something about knowing it, right? So you are regulating something that maybe, we don't know enough, right? So that is very challenging. And also we have to reflect when we talk about this production alternative, right? The fuel that we're talking about. Today we buy fuel from, about 22 producing countries, right? For SAF, we will have to have productions everywhere in the world, right? So it's a different setup, which have to think about that. Sorry, I come back to SAF again, because that is the technology.
It gets back to distribution and refinery, right, Nicole?
Sorry, I haven't picked up a microphone. Yes, it does. It does. Comes to distribution. I suppose Amex GBT, working with over 19,000 clients, SMEs, multinationals, we help them to manage their business travel emissions. But when we look at the statistics, we see that over 90% of their emissions actually come from air. So that is why when we talk about sustainable business travel, we talk about sustainable aviation just as much. And we know, as was just said, aviation is considered a hard-to-abate sector, so we absolutely need both public and private sector action and collaboration. But I will say that I believe the public sector plays an important role in creating an enabling environment, the regulatory framework, so that the private sector can go and make bold investments with confidence that they're, as much as you can have confidence that there's going to be a return. And that is where we believe, Amex GBT, that the business travel sector has an important role in helping to scale SAF, and we have a partnership.
In terms of even corporate travel policy.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it comes into that as well, corporate travel policies. So we said earlier that, with the end consumers, the travelers, they may not yet care, realize, see, identify what carbon emissions are all about when they book their travel. But I would disagree that when you look at business travel specifically, the picture is a bit different, because corporations have increasingly ambitious emission reduction targets, and they are actively looking for decarbonization solutions such as SAF.
And when they negotiate agreements in terms of their conventions, their meetings, their conferences, that's now on the table. It's part of the negotiating table about what they're going to accept from a hotel, from a resort, from a convention provider, correct?
Absolutely. In the sourcing process, not just SAF, wider sustainability absolutely comes into play more and more. And so it is really important from a distributor or TMC point of view that we can connect clients with the most sustainable suppliers. So that could be in the hotel space, certified hotels, it could be EVs, you name it, or SAF for the sustainability of aviation.
I relate to how I got here. How did I get to Nîmes, right? I could have flown from the United States to Paris and then flown from Paris to Montpellier. I didn't. I couldn't take the train to Paris because I was flying from New York, but I did take the train from Paris to Nîmes. And that brings up Philip, who's right. Philip is back there joining us virtually. We've seen in the last 2 or 3 years, whether it was in France or most recently in the Netherlands, where I was shocked to see an ad from KLM. You saw the ad basically saying, please don't fly us. I mean, that's what they were saying. On short-haul flights, please take the train. And let's face it, when you take a look at the infrastructure design in a country like the Netherlands, or in Switzerland, or in Germany, and many others, the train station's at the airport. I mean, so you can actually make connections in a much easier way. The real question that I have for Philippe is, and for all of you is, it's one thing for me to say, okay, I made the connection, I landed in Paris, and then I took the train here. But can the trains handle that volume now? Are you set up for it? Philippe.
Yeah, okay. So, thank you. First, I must say that I'm very sorry not to be with you in this beautiful city of Nîmes, but thank you for giving me this opportunity to share some view. To answer your question, I think that we can really bring a consensus from all of us on the need to absolutely reduce the emission of transportation, and that there is no one solution, but the need to do that all together for each mode of transportation. But also, and that's where your point is absolutely right, we need some kind of modal shift. That means that each mode of transportation should be used for where it is most appropriate, but also taking into consideration the externalities, and especially the CO2 emission. And we know that train there is a relation between 1 to 20 for CO2 emission in relation to aviation, or 1 to 30 in relation to car, for example. So what is the answer of the rail industry for this challenge? It is to improve its solutions. And you were right that you gave this example of Paris-Nîmes by TGV. What we are doing, first, the rail industry is getting more greener. It's already green, especially because it's generally electrical. And of course, it depends on the energy mix of each country. But this also on the energy side, people know that they have to be greener. But also, for example, let's take Europe. Maybe you don't know that almost half of the lines are not electrified. And they are not going to be electrified because it's very, very, very costly. So what we are doing, we are bringing other kind of tractions, and especially we are bringing, for example, hydrogen train. We were speaking about hydrogen for aviation. In the case of train, it is already functioning. We have Alstom is some years before the other competitors. We have a hydrogen train running in Germany presently, like any other train. It works perfectly. So the technology is absolutely already managed. Also, we have battery trains, another example. So one thing is greener technology, and the other aspect is digital technology. And that's your point about the TGV. There is a need to better use the present infrastructure. And to take this example of TGV, what are we doing? We are bringing new digital technology signaling in order to reduce the time between two trains. That means that on the Paris-Lyon line, which is already very much used, well, we will be able, with this new digital technology, to put more trains within the same line. Since we are also increasing the capacity of the train, you have to think that we are going to, in the next years, without changing the infrastructure, we will bring 40% more capacity on the line. And also the digital will be able to bring better service to the users so that they know what train to take, and also for the operator being able to adapt the service to the need. So I think that all of us, we have to improve our technologies, and that's the way for the rail industry we are going to do it. And of course, there is a need, as it has been said, for the users to be conscious of the consequence of their behaviors.
Well, I will tell you, Philippe, that as opposed to Rita Marquez's plane that never arrived yesterday, my trip from the Gare de Lyon to Nîmes was on time to the minute. It was very full, by the way, because of course all the kids were on holiday, but it was on time. I speak from a perspective of the United States, where our train system is somewhat embarrassing. We don't have high-speed rail, and here we're talking about public-private partnerships. In the United States, everybody says they're for high-speed rail, but in the United States, who owns the tracks? It's the freight lines. They could care less about high-speed rail. So now you have every mayor in every city saying, we want it, and when you give them the idea of it and show them the route structure, they go, oh yeah, but it's got to stop in my town. Well, then it becomes a local. So we are, if you think we're ways away from SAF and hybrid flights, we are decades away from high-speed rail in the United States, and here in France, you are decades ahead of us. So congratulations on that, and I hope you can continue to use the alternative fuels within the existing infrastructure to make that work. What you were saying, Kata, before about labeling, I want to go back to that, about messaging, because that really applies to Club Med and everybody else, and that is this, and it's an area of cynicism, if you will. I remember, and everybody in this audience probably does as well, going back 5 or 10 years ago, you check into a hotel, and there's a little sign on your bed that says, please help us save the environment by not washing your towel. And I used to laugh because the sign was in plastic.
We would reuse the sign, though. Probably something that was already quite good.
That's Gregory, by the way, from Club Med.
The first thing is the work that you are doing is extremely important. And that's the crucial part, because at the end of the day, we rely on transfers, on transportation for tourism to happen. And I believe that on the hospitality side, the technological step is much smaller to get to the right place. But I'm going to say a few words on where we come from. Because at the end of the day, all of this that we are doing, that you are doing, is for the good reason, which was probably at the inception of the new era of tourism 70 years ago when Club Med was created. And the motto at that time is important today, I think. The founders of Club Med were creating something that was allowing people to reconnect after the Second World War, reconnect with oneself and reconnect with the others and with people, thanks to sports and nature. And I believe that this message that it was 70 years ago is still the reason why we are all doing all these efforts, because at the end of the day, that's what tourism can bring. Now, what we have done over the last 70 years is showing that the step is not that strong. It's for how long as we can remember, in what we have done in Club Med, we have always settled down in places where we were invited by governments and by the people. We were invited because they were looking at developing their country. They were looking at bringing to their people means to have a better life. And what we could do at Club Med, because of a very specific model, was to settle down in places where nobody else could go and where there was no activity, there was no economic activity, and that's what we were bringing. And on the other side, from this very first moment, we were convinced that it cannot go without the local communities. So we started hiring locally. We started giving employment, training people, give them career, local career, global career. And thanks to this, I believe that tourism in many places has helped generations of people for having a better life. I think it has brought people together for understanding better each other, and that's what we are committed to. But now, obviously, that was 70 years ago, that's been the case for the last 70 years, and that's really not enough. So for the last 15 years, and I'm going to speak about the technological step, which I think is not that big, we've been working on how can we build sustainably, because we believe that on our side, there is so much we can do into including people and benefiting the local people. There is so much we still have to do, but there was a challenge on the building side. And funny enough, 10 years ago, there was not such thing as a sustainable construction certification for resorts. You had many things for city buildings, but there didn't exist something that would be adapted to resorts. So 10 years ago with the BREEAM organization, we created this certification that could apply to resorts. Because we thought that it's not about putting solar panel there, or it's not about renewing the water there. It's about the whole construction team on a site that should follow the same path and the same objective, which is on each item that you can deal or play with, push the limit further. And thanks to BREEAM, now we are in capacity to have very strong environmental commitments in our construction sites. And that doesn't apply only to the French Alps, where we can, 2,000 meters high, apply sustainability measures, but it applies also in Malaysia, it applies in China, it applies in Japan, or it applies in the US or in Canada, where we brought our first ski resort in Quebec with a BREEAM certification. This is not perfect, but the BREEAM enables us to monitor our progress. And I was interested by the keynote of the Secretary of Tourism for Portugal before. I think in the French Alps, we are the only ones certifying with BREEAM our construction. Why? That's because what we build is probably the bigger items that are built. And it's because that at the end of the day, there is a cost to organizing this. And I believe that this cost of certifying what we do for small, medium companies is too high a cost so that they can follow this route. So I believe that there are things to do with the public sector into helping finance monitoring in the hospitality of what we are doing in terms of construction and then in terms of benefiting the local communities. So there is a full something to be explored here.
You talk about cost, and I'll talk about worth, right? When the accountants run the asylum, everybody goes crazy. So if you can actually introduce them to the worth aspect of it as opposed to the cost aspect of it, you may be having to make some progress. One note about the plastic card on the bed, and that is you talked about inclusion. When you include your customer, your traveler, in the process, then they really appreciate the product. And I remember holding up that card in a hotel in Hawaii going, what is this? And a bellman said to me, come here, I want to show you something. And he took me downstairs into their laundry. I had never seen washing machines this big. I had never seen volume this big. And he then explained to me how many pounds of detergent and phosphates were needed to wash my towel. I was on board with one caveat, because the cynicism is, all right, you're saving all this money, where's the money going? And if you can show me that the money's going back into the community, that it's going back to the local communities, and you can connect the dots, it's a win-win for everybody. It's about following the money. You're nodding your head.
Yeah, I think you, Gregory, yourself just introduced a concept which is vital, I think, which is local community, which is people. I don't truly believe that, you know, the largest challenge that as human being we're facing is climate change. That is for sure the most urgent, but it's not the widest. The widest is social inequalities. And the fight to climate change is growing social inequalities. And so if I try to make a trajectory in the 30 years' time, I see as all of us has a clear responsibility in generating value for people, not just for, we've been focusing a lot on technology. I mean, if I see where cruise industry and cost in particular can be game changer, I see that in impact for people, for local communities. 1 year ago, we launched what is still a unique in the panorama of cruise industry, which is the Costa Manifesto for a value-driven, sustainable, and inclusive tourism, which defines the leadership of the company in 2050 based on the capacity of being inclusive and creating value for the people, for the local communities who hosts our ships. We are guests. I mean, when we call Marseille, when we call Barcelona, we are guests of that local communities, and that's why we are gradually opening our ship to make sure it becomes a facility to the city. Because, I don't know, for example, children from school, maybe with disabilities, can spend good time on board, can learn things, can be in contact with our environmental officer and learn. For example, every time we call a port in Italy, France, or Spain, we disembark food. We've been doing that for the last 3 years, and we'll restart that. We had to pause it due to COVID, of course. We'll restart later this year in Martinique and Guadeloupe. Every time we call a port, we overproduce food and we disembark for people in need.
But then there are the communities that may not want you. There are the communities like Venice. There are the communities like Barcelona, like Dubrovnik, that are, and Bermuda, that have put on moratorium, if you will, on the number of cruise ships that can be in the port in any one day. For those people who've done cruises in the Caribbean, you have my sympathy if you're there in St. Thomas on the day that the cruise ships are there, because there are 7 of them there. It's such a tax on the infrastructure. There are not enough toilets. There's not enough anything. And the real double-edged sword here, talk about public-private partnership and working, is to convince the local authorities that this is not helping, that you have to manage it better. So then the real question becomes this: do you expense it out of proportion? So if you want to go visit the gorillas in Rwanda, that's $3,500 to go. Bhutan just reopened after 2 years, and there's a charge now if you want to visit Bhutan of $250 a day per passenger, right? Venice is putting in a charge if you want to go to St. Mark's Square, not related to the cruise ships, to anybody. Does that really solve the problem and create a sustainable environment? I don't think it does.
I don't, me neither. I think that putting taxes is always the last resort, as banning things is always the last resource we have. The best practice that we put in place, either in the Canary Islands and last week by signing the Sustainable Charter for cruise industry in Marseille in the framework of the Blue Summit, was to self-regulation and dealing with local communities, saying, well, we keep an eye on each other and we do synergic step toward a sustainable approach to tourism.
Well, let's talk about the elephant in the room that was here before the pandemic. Topic A was over-tourism, right? We don't want to become another Venice. We don't want to become another Barcelona. And I was actually surprised because during the pandemic, if you're, okay, they're not going to think about that anymore. It's going to go away. It didn't go away. There are more people traveling in the last 2 months than were traveling 3 years ago. Those numbers are up, and people are not price sensitive. They're traveling at any cost. Super. And the folks in the hotel business, Greg, you know this because you're getting rates you never got before. I mean, but the question that every hotelier is asking, only from an economic perspective, is it sustainable? Can we get those numbers? When do we get to a point where we don't talk about the numbers and we talk about the impact itself?
That is the question. I don't see over-tourism as a matter of numbers or quantity. I think it's a matter of quality. The reason why we had the bubble burst in Venice is because the kind of tourism that was flooding Venice, by the way, we are a tiny percentage of that, of course, because Venice has 10 million passengers a year and we are less than 10%, so we were. Is the fact that that kind of mass tourism is trying to, put everything on the same level, is not capable of acknowledging, understanding, and recognizing the identity of a local community. Either you go in Venice or Dubrovnik or Barcelona, some people are looking for the same, slice of margherita pizza. So this is what we are fighting thoroughly. And last year we launched an initiative to find and preserve and bring to the future the identities and the local traditions of every community that we visit by dealing directly with them. So sitting on the table, trying to understand what is the problem, what are the local traditions that are vital to your identity, that defines you as a community, which are jeopardized but mass tourism, and we help you doing that.
Although everybody here on the podium shares one thing in common. Your business is depending on what? Growth. It's about growing the business, right? Ministers of tourism sink or swim based on what? The numbers. What's the average number of the number of visitors, the average number of stays, the days? What's the average spend? Can we?
But on this, there's been a shift. For instance, in France, it's been for a while, or for a very long time, a number of tourism that was a target. The target is shifting to a value. in itself and not the number, because at the end of the day we all agree that what counts as the value that you can bring. But we need to get ready, because the number of tourists is not going to go down, because the people that have been lucky enough to travel has been a very few minority of this planet, and there are people that are looking at us and saying, yeah, I want my share also. So the question now is, how can we develop facilities to have more places to visit and places closer to the source market? So that's why in China for the last 15 years, they've been, and we've been working with them, they've been working on developing local resorts, local places around the large cities of China, so that these Chinese people, they can have their places also, not all the time going abroad, but next to their hometown, so that they can go on holidays. So there is a need to develop this capacity so that we can not overcrowd the existing places that we have. And by doing this, let's try and design them with as a low carbon footprint as we can, with regional destinations, so that people can indeed go there by train. They have a very good high-speed train in China, by the way.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
And the fastest one, I believe. Kata, for you and Nicole, in terms of distribution and technology, it's one thing to talk about this, but it's another thing to figure out the numbers that we're talking about in terms of aviation and distribution. What I mean by that is, if you take a look at every airline right now that's somewhat financially healthy, all they're talking about is initiating new routes. Because, as Raphael will tell you, they have the technology in the new aviation planes, right, to be able to do ultra long haul, and also medium long haul that they never did before. Going to secondary and tertiary markets is what Greg was saying about going into those local communities that didn't go before. So in the United States right now, if you take a look at where the growth is, it's not within the United States. In fact, they're cutting markets there. There are certain markets in the United States that have no air service at all anymore, right? At the end of the pandemic, Toledo, Ohio is no longer serviced by American, United, or Delta. So if you don't have airlift, your economy dies, right? That's what happened when the stagecoaches stopped coming to those towns in the West. They became ghost towns. Whereas, where are the airlines putting their money now? Transatlantic, Trans-Pacific again. And so United Airlines right now is the largest transatlantic carrier in the world, more than British Airways and Delta and American combined. And where are they flying? They're not just flying to London or Paris. They're flying to Tenerife, and they're flying to Dubrovnik, and they're flying to the Azores. The question that becomes is, as they're doing that, where's the regulation and where's the vision so that they can not continue a problem, but basically solve it before they get there?
Again, that touches on a number of things. The two words that I heard from both of the gentlemen was value, and I think that really is what closes the loop from the over-tourism problem to the taxation problem to your regulation question. And the concept of shared value, I think, is one that helps to unlock this. So in the case of actual destinations, certainly my view is that the reason there are protests in Venice and other places is that the value accrues disproportionately. It's a market failure. And that's why the knee-jerk to that is to ramp up prices, because prices squeeze down demand. That's why it's working. In terms of your question of why are airlines flying to secondary markets, well, they're commercial operators.
Oh, I'm not asking why. I'm asking, what are you doing to make sure that the things we're talking about on the stage today get basically implemented?
Right. So, but what are we trying to implement? So, what we're trying to implement, what I'm hearing, is sustainable development of tourism value, not numbers. And actually, opening up secondary markets are, by most measures, more beneficial because it takes less CO2 to fly direct from a secondary city in the US to a secondary city in France, if that is truly where you want people to flow from. So actually, I don't think that's a problem per se. It brings.
But that's a paradigm shift in the old hub and spoke.
Absolutely, but that pendulum has been swinging for 20 years. So it's more about what, and I liked your comment about where Club Med has set up, which is where it has been invited. There are so many stakeholders involved in these decisions, and we know, I mean, my team goes to things like the World Routes Conference, where airports are falling over themselves to bid and compete for air service to a tourism destination. I mean, this is huge business. I'm sure many people in this room are involved in that. That's not a problem per se. The challenge is, are you getting the right tourists? Do you have the right products that then capture the value and gets them to stick around?
Okay, stop right there. Define the right tourists.
Well, whoever meets your specific product, right? So your point about bringing in anybody at the lowest cost who perhaps doesn't leave the cruise ship, doesn't spend money in the museum, doesn't buy the local produce, that is not going to be adding much value to the local economy, which is why you get the pushback from the local population. Even if they may have a low-paid job, they will see that actually the environmental degradation, the stress far outweighs the opportunity to work as a low-paid waiter in the local resort. So that's what I mean about the right tourists. And I don't think there's anything wrong with price differentiation. And this race to the bottom that we've had through low-cost air travel, lowest price of everything, has a lot to answer for. And when you have people like the CEO of Ryanair saying actually prices are coming up, that's a pretty strong signal that the pendulum is swinging the other way.
I remember talking to the foreign minister of Bhutan, and I said, are you pricing yourself out of the market and making yourself only available for elite travelers? Because I think we could all agree that what the jet age did back in the late 50s and early 60s, it democratized travel. It allowed the middle class to afford to go somewhere. And you know what his answer was to me? You should save up.
Yeah, and that's a very fair point. At the end of the day, it's something that you will do once in a lifetime, and you're not going to come back 10 times to Venice if you have to pay for it.
Coming back to the inequality issue, I think this push toward prices will further increase, will limit market access to people which simply will not afford to do that. I mean, look at India, 1 billion of people, which as prices will go up, they will be unable to travel the world. Why should they be hinder that right of traveling, of exploring? I see sensibilization, growing people awareness, making people aware of what the challenges or what the solutions are as the key of that. And I see a tremendous potential for all of us. I mean, for different duration, but we all keep in custody our clients. Our CEO says, we keep our guests in custody for 7 days. They spend 7 days on board. If we would like to convert them to another religion, we could do that. The same for you. The same even for a shorter period of time for airlines or for trains. Why don't we, and most of the time we are, dedicating to go from point A to point B is wasted time. We say, I have to travel for 3 hours by train or by airplane or whatever. Why don't we take advantage of that time to transfer our guests some principle, some practical example, and we lead by example them to have better behaviors toward the destinations.
But that goes back to even business travel, Nicole, because how do you spend your time? Do you spend most of your time getting there, or do you actually have a chance to immerse yourself in the environment and do something where you actually have, as you talked about before, a conversation with the people who actually live there? And out of that comes a greater understanding.
Yeah, 2 points, if I may also touch on what was just said, and I'm going to touch on that. Demand management as a solution to get the travel sector to achieve sustainability, I think is not the right way. We have the means, as we all agree on the panel, we have the means to invest and be part of the solution. And again, with business travel, there's a significant opportunity there because corporations are working towards their own targets. So they're willing to pay that premium to have a more sustainable option over a less sustainable option.
And that wasn't the case 5 years ago.
Exactly, and that comes with increasing pressure, bottom up, top down, regulation and policy, but also employees, the wider public, consumers. But to touch on your other point on pleasure, I suppose, what we see right now.
It's happening, yes.
Yeah, it's happening. The pandemic, working from home has given people a sense of flexibility, a degree of flexibility that we cherish and we welcome. And you see more and more people combine maybe an extra day or a weekend trip when you are already on a business trip, and thereby spreading their spend.
The one thing we really haven't talked about, because it's a relatively new trend, is how many Fortune 500 corporations are completely changing their HR policies about vacation time. They're giving everybody unlimited vacation. It's not 2 weeks a year, 3 weeks a year, they're not even monitoring it. And part of business travel is you always wanted to manage it, right? Part of business, you wanted to manage the expense. Now with people combining business with leisure and working from home, it's changed it's thrown that out the window. So now what that means is for Club Med, for the airlines, for the trains, people may be working remotely, but they're also traveling more.
Yeah, that's right, that's right. And the point is that, they might be mixing the two and it might be harder to specifically distinguish, but do we really want them to distinguish? Probably not, because real sustainability, in the old days we wanted to. What businesses still want to measure clearly is what are the carbon emissions associated to the business trip as opposed to the leisure trip. I will say that. There is technology and, through the point of sale, as we call it, we can measure that. But I think at the end of the day, if the two merge, the more they can merge, the better and the more sustainable for destinations that host business travelers.
Two more things I want to bring up in terms of routes and planning. We talked about aviation. Philippe, are you laying new track? We see airlines going to all these new destinations. I would assume you could be laying new track to going to other destinations.
Yes, of course. And also, I would go back to the passenger experience. We can very much improve the experience of our passengers in the trains with Wi-Fi, with the possibility for the kids to play and so on, so that the travel is not anymore a time lost, but time that is experience with pleasure for the people. So that first thing I wanted to say. And the second thing to add is that I think that I insist on the issue of emergency. A business as usual scenario is not an option anymore. So if the behaviors are not changing and if the professionals are not offering all the solutions to the travelers, then the problem will have to be solved through regulation. And as someone has said, it's not the best way. But look at France; they have decided to not authorize anymore travel by air when there is an alternative by train until 2 hours and 30. It doesn't change a lot. But you will see this kind of measure coming if the professionals are not offering alternative solutions.
Well, as Gregory said, if you don't have a conversation, then the regulation will come without intelligence. And then regulation may be needed, right? I mean, regulation happens when rules don't get, when people disobey. There's a reason why there's a speed limit. It's normal. But the bottom line is, in terms of speed limit, we've come to the end of our panel. Otherwise we'll get a speeding ticket. Please, ladies and gentlemen, thank our panel. Philippe, thank you as well. And
thank you very much.
And as we leave the stage, I will ask Rajan to come back up with our next event. Rajan, are you here? He's right there. Thank you, everybody.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Now, I'm sure you have heard about the Global Travel and Tourism Resilience Council, a body that I was pleased to witness being formed some years ago, and I watched it grow and develop under the influence of my next guest, who was just walking onto stage, have a seat, who's possibly the best-known tourism minister in the world, I would say. Incredibly passionate and driven and always on the move around the world, creating partnerships, forging new deals, always putting people first, no matter what the crisis we are facing is. There could be natural disasters, climate issues, COVID. He's been there to take the responsibility for the welfare of the small guys in particular. and especially the islands of the Caribbean. So we're going to have a little chat here about how we're going to solve all the world's problems, aren't we, Edmund? Yeah. So please put your hands together for Minister Edmund Bartlett from Jamaica. Okay, so by the way, congratulations on Jamaica surpassing its 2019 levels. And as you said, it's not a completely smooth story. There's other elements to it, and we're going to touch on that. But let's just get to the nub of this, because even more than ever, sustainability is front and center of all conversations about travel. So how encouraged are you by the actions taken by the big players, governments, and the private sector in the industry? Are you convinced it's more than rhetoric and greenwashing?
Well, I think we have to begin on the basis that the environment is the product. So that's what we market, that's what we sell. And let's start with perhaps a little look at the sociology of tourism, and you see the hierarchical arrangement. And at the top are the big boys who own the distribution systems and control the supply chain. Mm-hmm. And then in the middle are the local guys who are the providers of the experience. And then at the bottom are the workers, mm-hmm. those who are the ones that enable these experiences to be realized and to be consumed. So that triangle, if we would visualize it, represents then the structure of what tourism and travel is truly all about. So how serious and where's government in that?
Yeah.
Because government is somewhat out of that structure, but in that government through policy, legislative and regulatory arrangements, define the parameters within which that structure can function. It enables connectivity protocols between countries. Mm-hmm. We call some of it air service agreements, and then we have found what we call different freedoms. First freedom, second, third, seventh, and then open skies. Mm-hmm. So within that context, government provides a framework for tourism and travel. So at the top, where the big boys are, until technology overtakes them, which is happening fast, yeah, they still control. And so they determine the type of energy source that is used in tourism. And since we recognize that climate change is the number one threat to tourism, yeah, especially for small island states like ours that are dependent so much on the ocean and are influenced by weather conditions, weather patterns, seismic activity, and of course the other mega events such as terrorism and cyber crimes and so on and so on. But let's focus on the climate issue, because that's a big elephant in the room for island tourism in particular. But they decide where the guests go, where the tourist goes. So they decide what type of energy is being used by the big aircraft that they own. And it's a smaller and smaller number of people who are owning them. Yeah. And they decide also where the ships go, the cruise ships. And again, it's a smaller and smaller group of people who are owning them. And then in the middle, you have these tour operators, again, who decide where the guest goes, how many rooms they're buying from which hotel, and so on and so on and so forth.
Are they working together, though, Edmund?
So this is it. So the collaboration between them, with a recognition that we are losing the race on climate change. That we propose that we would have, I think, a 1.5 increase in temperatures,
Yep.
and we're running at 2.7
Exactly.
to 2050 if we're not careful.
Yep.
So they need to realize it now at that end, at the big boys' end. And then government, through legislation and regulation, could ensure that there are limits to how far you go. There are rules of engagement in your destination. And those rules have at the base of it sustainability strategies.
When you say the big guys decide who goes where and what transport goes where and all that kind of stuff, and then the governments do their thing, are you saying that the big guys are in charge and that the governments are just have no real control over what the big guys do?
Well, as a public person, it's difficult to admit it. But the hardcore realities are that governments do respond to the drivers of the economy, and that you are foolish or perhaps foolhardy if you ignore what these drivers of the economy are saying. Because government, well, certainly neoliberal and laissez-faire type governments, free market governments, are not driven by state enterprise. They are driven by the market through the private sector. And therefore, you have to respond to what the private sector is saying. So yes, I would say that the private sector has a very strong hand in terms of what governments would do, policies that would be generated, and laws and regulations.
And we just had a session, Edmund, where we've had chiefs of some of those industries. And for example, SAF, sustainable aviation fuel, is only 0.1% or something ridiculous of the fuel that's being used. We are nowhere near getting close to that point where we can say 1.5 degrees is a viable option. Indeed. So what can be done about that? I mean, yes, there is recognition at conferences like this. They're here, they're admitting that, yep, something has to be done.
Well, let me tell you what I think. I think the only thing that can be done now is science. We're going to have to go back to science and the technologies that must emerge from innovation and to create more efficient ways of first of all, generating the energy, and two, the equipment that we're now producing, the aircraft that we're making, the cruise ships that we're building, the motor vehicles that we're building, the trains that we're building, all of that have to now respond to what I call the technological challenge of efficiencies, so that we utilize energy better and or are adapted to new forms of energy. Hydrogen, for example, is but the issue with that is highly combustible, very difficult to manage and to operate. Have to be very careful about it. Nuclear, another, very difficult and delicate, but these are sources of energy that are cleaner, that are greener, and that will enable us to get to that 1.5 or close to.
And are you confident that with technology, I think as Peter was just pointing out in the previous thing, that over time efficiencies of scale of economy will mean that these things become cheaper and therefore more viable? Because at the moment sustainable fuel is very expensive.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right. But you see, the transformation process is what's going to determine to a large extent the rate of growth in these areas. So the faster we move to green energy is the greater the efficiencies, I believe, that we'll be able to generate from the critical mass that will entail, and then the economy of scale will chip in, naturally.
Yeah.
And so in a short while, the average guy with a little home in Jamaica will be able to afford the alternative energies that are provided.
Now you go around the world. You do talk to loads of people and loads of big influencers in the industries that we're talking about. At the receiving end of this is the little guys, like the island economies, like yours, like the Maldives, like Bangladesh, places that are going to basically be submerged. This is real shit, if I can say it, coming up.
Yes.
So how do you feel about that? Do you feel frustrated that you can't actually push them harder?
Well, sessions like these, and if we proliferate them, COP27, perhaps in Egypt down the road, you know, Green Fund discussions, and also the drive for CSR in, you know, these companies, and a stronger education program where there's a recognition that we must ensure that in the DNA of business is sustainability consideration. That the bottom line in your balance sheet must reflect it, that you're investing in it because it has returns that's going to make life better for you down the road. So these are the recognition that has to be had now in order for us to be able to drive a real hope for these island, small island states that are hugely vulnerable. They are the ones that are going to be disappearing faster. Not the big guys, not the mega metropolis of the world, but the Maldives, you know, the Jamaicas, the Cayman Islands, the Barbados, you know, the Seychelles, and so on. These are the countries that are going to be vulnerable, and where rising sea levels will devastate their coastal area and tourism with it. It has to be remembered that in these countries, over 70% of the tourism is driven by coastal.
The blue economy.
Blue economy.
Yeah.
And besides, they say the 3 S's louder than everybody else: sand, sea, and sun. And sand, sea, and sun can only survive if sustainability is the key word in our development, the way forward. But I want to make a point about also the tourism that must emerge from this recovery. Because I discussed with you the sociology of tourism and this hierarchical structure, that pyramid. But the technology today, this highly, what I call hyper-connective society, creating from this knowledge age that has been forged, is changing the way that structure is going to function. Because it is taking away from the center the power of proprietary knowledge and information and distributing it to the peripheries.
You see that as a democratic good thing?
Absolutely. So more and more people, through this instrument, is knowing more, is taking greater control of their own lives with knowledge and information that allows them to make decisions, informed decisions. And then technology through the virtual experiences, this whole cognitive system that's now redefining the way in which we are operating, is helping us to see things, know things, touch things, feel things, decide on things even before we go to destinations,
not to
physically see them.
But not to replace the actual trip.
Not at all,
no. But
rather to augment it, so that this whole discussion, for example, the latest one of the metaverse, and what happens in that virtual space, it gives you a sense of where you can go and to determine what it is that you want to see and where you want to go in. And what it does is to remove that middle layer of the hierarchy I just discussed to you and insert you now as the individual. And what it also does is to create for the destination a new control of the asset called tourists, or what in economics we say the import, which we then export, called tourists. So the tourist is no longer owned by any entity that then transfers it to you, and you pay an enormous amount for that import that you then export. Now you can get that import for minimal costs because they are connected with you. They're on your platform. They're talking to you through social media and all sorts of other medium.
Yeah. We are going to very shortly actually have a session on data and a session on how governments, and you're going to be on that panel, how governments are working with the private sector to use the kind of knowledge and information that we're talking about. So we're going to pursue that point. But I do want to end on this point for now, which is that you are calling, and I want to talk about this, you are calling for a global resilience fund, right? To help the very small islands and countries that you're talking about. I mean, how realistic it is that, who's going to fund it? Tell me about, just a little bit about that.
Right. So in the same way that we have been trying to discuss resilience, sustainability, and to look at how we could measure sustainability, and in the process, how we could develop an index, a barometer. And then we can also look at what are the touch points that you follow to enable a sustainable operation. We can track the movement, for example, of our aircraft, the miles that they cover, and then the emissions, the CO2 emissions, and then we could tie some cost to that. So at the end, we could talk about perhaps an environmental tip or sustainability tip that each person could pay, each tourist, for example, whether it is about the food, the distance the food has to travel, the miles covered, etc., etc. In the same way, I think we need to look at resilience. And how do we measure the resilience? That is, the ability of a country to respond to disruptions, to recover, to mitigate, to recover quickly and then to thrive after disruptions. The big metropolitan countries with large budgets and great economies of scale and so on can manage this better. But the small countries that are hugely dependent on tourism but highly vulnerable and weakly resourced have the greatest difficulty to recover after disruptions. When a hurricane hits a Caribbean country like, say, Dominica, and devastates 98% of its GDP, it's years to recover because there are no resources. Even Puerto Rico, that has the great United States, as its benefactor, is struggling to recover.
Hawaii is in trouble.
Hawaii is in trouble, and we can go on. So what needs to happen now is that the global realities that disruptions are going to continue must be there. And therefore, how do we enable these smaller countries who are, in fact, the destination that your tourists are going? How are we going to help them to recover quickly and well? And so I thought that we needed to establish a fund in the same way that the World Bank has a fund, that IDB has a fund, to look at how do we move quickly to help Haiti, that after earthquake 10, 20, 15 years ago, is still nowhere close to recovering. The result of which is social decay and crime and violence and almost an unmanageable society resulting today, where the United States and Canada are now discussing how do we intervene to protect them and to save lives and put Haiti back on track. So these are the concerns that we have, and I think a fund is needed, and we can measure the critical impact of these disruptions on countries, and we can also look at how do we then contribute. Do we establish a resilience tip? So that when you go to the restaurant, a 1% is added because your food needs to be there always. And so you need to build the capacity to build back fast to get your food quickly in.
So that's one way of raising the...
That's one way of raising it. Another way, of course, would be, I think, on destinations doing it directly, based obviously on their vulnerabilities. And we perhaps develop a vulnerability scale. You see, one of the reasons I've established the Global Tourism Resilience and Crisis Management Center in academia, at a university, is to enable that academic rigor so that young minds can be creating for us new ways, innovation, to define how we do things better and how we are able to recover faster and more efficient.
And that's exactly what we are going to talk about in the panel coming up.
Yes.
But I do want to ask you, just finally, how close are you to getting this fund?
Well, we are in the discussion stage, and hopefully this little fireside chat has helped to stimulate even further thought on it. We need more ideas to come forward as to how it can be done, because part of the concern is the cynicism about these global things, and where does the money go, and who manages it, and does it really reach the people and the countries that is really intended to? In other words, does it go to the needy or the greedy? You know, and so on. So these are concerns that we have to work through. The UN is accepting, in the process of accepting, I can't preempt them, the recommendation by Jamaica for a global tourism resilience and day to be established. So we have proposed the 17th of February every year to be designated as Global Tourism Resilience Day. The world stands and reflects on the importance of building resilience. We look at how to do it, how to create the institutional mechanisms and the capacity for people and countries to recover properly when disruptions hit them. So if we get that one going, and I'm announcing the date again, it's February 17, 2023 in Kingston, Jamaica. And we're inviting the world. Those who can make it, yes, those who can't. And we know the vast majority won't. But virtually, you can connect. But the commitment, let us commit to build resilience and to fund resilience.
Okay, let's see what happens. Edmund, for now, because you're about to come back on stage anyway, for now, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Edmund Bartlett, ladies and gentlemen. Peter.
Thank you, Rajan, and thank you, Edmund. Always a pleasure to see you, sir. It's been said that if you can't measure something, you can't manage it. And so now let's find out if there's the critical data available that might, could, would, or maybe even should guide global decision-making. Here to help us with that, he's the global head of transportation, travel, and logistics for Roland Berger. Please welcome to the stage Didier Beschmeyer.
Thanks a lot. So, ladies and gentlemen, thanks a lot for attending. I'm very happy and proud to support Christian with the team, with Sebastian, with the Roland Berger team for that event. So yes, I am leading, and Roland Berger, we are providing some industry supports regarding strategy and transformation for the companies or for the industries. And today, what we would like to present, I would like to present what we have done for the French State Ministry of Transportation, preparing a few topics regarding the preparation of the LTAG, as you know, signed a few days ago at ICAO, the long-term ambition goal. That's the first strong framework, and I really believe that will support investment in the aviation, representing 40% of the travel emissions and 2-3% of the global emission worldwide. So it's a survey we have done on 12 countries, representing more than 50% of the total population of the world, regarding what are the expectations about traveling by air, aviation, from the citizen, travelers and non-travelers. So we have selected some slides, some figures. Please, then we could provide some more detail on that presentation.
So the next guy wanted to do that.
So 12 countries. The 12 countries, it's all over the world, from the US to China, South Africa, the UK, Great Britain, France, Brazil, Indonesia, India, so 12, and you can see some differences within the whole countries. So first topic, it's we ask for the citizens what will be the the way they will recover. They thought to fly after the end of the COVID-19 crisis. And we can see that after that crisis, we are still on that uncertainty, if we can see what's happened in China. Travelers in 11 out of the 12 countries intend to travel at least as much as before, with Indonesia citizens mentioning that they would like to travel less, and Indian citizens telling that they will travel more than before in what they have planned. We also can see, and we ask them, what is their level of knowledge, education, regarding CO2 emission. And on average, 2/3 of the all respondents perceive the air transport sector really above what it is. Because if we have 2-3% of the total emission for the aviation, you can see that 2/3 of the respondents consider it's up than 4%. And you have 37% consider that the CO2 emission is up than 8%. And France, as you can see here, need to be a little bit teached, if I may say, because only 23% of the population represented by that survey know that the CO2 emission for aviation is less than 4%. So some things to do regarding, as you have already mentioned, on communication. What's quite is key from my point of view regarding that survey is the panelists within the whole countries believe that air transport sector is crucial for their economy, for their education, for their development. And as you can see, it's circa 92% of the total average of that 12 countries who are considering that aviation is key for their own development. And you have 7 countries up to 95% considering that aviation is quite key. So most maybe mature regarding climate change, regarding maybe some communication as Germany, UK, France, on some extent, have less, but still up to or close to 80%, considering that it's quite critical. Even if they consider that it's quite key, that travel and aviation as a mode to travel, they also consider that decarbonization efforts from the players, from the industry, is not enough. And the industry need to push and to go forward on the decarbonization of the aviation sector. So yes, they would like to continue to travel, but they ask for actions. When we ask them, what is from your point of view the major levers, actions that the industry regarding aviation should take now, the first they mention is biofuel. And then is whole regarding hydrogen and a new generation of engine or aircraft. We can find on the fourth position the carbon offsetting. That's we'll have the opportunity for discussion this afternoon in a roundtable. And the modal shift to rail, less than 20%, 90% consider that it is important for replacing the flight by train. So of course that depends on the situation of the countries and of the needs for that flight. Who should pay for maybe new energy, that it means offsetting on one end and new energy, new fuel? All the respondents, all the panels consider that they believe that airlines, so the industry should take their share on that investment for circa 50% and 25% from fuel manufacturer. That in California they have started to work on some specific mechanism regarding SAF subsidies, if I may say, and public funding for 28%. So they consider that the industry, of course, should move. What is, okay, the industry have to move, but what's regarding their own position and their willingness to pay more for traveling, willingness to pay for offsetting, or willingness to pay for related regarding extra cost with some new fuels means biofuel. So as we can see on all respondents, you have still 24% or 23% offsetting or for biofuel opened on only declaration, yes, for sure, but to have some tickets up than 20% regarding price. So whatever it is, they, and that we can see during that summer, if you have an understanding on the evolution of the pricing on the yields this summer, so they still, when they need to travel, have that willingness to pay for decarbonization of their trips. So that's regarding the survey, some figures. Then we could deep dive on some countries. Of course, it's not exactly the same. We could deep dive on short, long haul, from short to long haul. That's not exactly the same. We also could deep dive on why they need to travel. Is it VFR, visiting friends of relatives? Is it for business, for leisure, for pleasure? So that then need to be deep dive, and all could and we could share some results on that. Then, beyond that study, as we have to think about investment, because it's nice, okay, biofuel, SAF, sustainable aviation fuel, that could be part of the solution, waiting for the innovation with new generation engines. Okay, fine. What could be the cost, the investment for the planet regarding biofuel? So you know, in fact, we have two types of fuels for the new gen fuels. You have the fuels coming from biologic trees and so on, and you have the e-fuel are coming from captation of the CO2 plus hydrogen, and that the output is some new e-fuel, what we call e-fuel. So we have two investments to take in consideration. The first one is the biofuel, and the biofuel, Roland Berger did that work to estimate what will be the investment for the world, and we find 500 billion of. It's an estimation that depends on the evolution and the speed of the innovation, but it's 500 billion euros for by 2050 to get the RefuelEU commitments, to get the LTAG, to get the IATA commitments regarding SAF, Sustainable Aviation Fuel incorporation in the airline. 500 billion. E-fuel. So captation of the CO2 and then plus hydrogen with some specific process, Fischer-Tropsch, that's some plants, and the technology is there. So now it's investment and risk to take regarding a lot of new plants for building, for creating that new fuel. For the e-fuel, that will be 1,200 billion euro in investment from now to 2040, 2050 for that new fuel. So considering both fuels to get and to target the commitments, that will be 1,700 billion for having a net zero emission with some other levers regarding aviation. What it is, 1,700 billion. You know NEOM, the line. The line, the end of the project, it's 500 billion. So it's a little bit much more than 3 times NEOM city to transform the aviation industry, to keep the travel and the tourism in all, continue to survive, to develop, or to keep a sustainable travel. So that's something we could touch, that's something we can do, but of course, that's all that's a roundtable we'll discuss regarding cooperation, regarding funding, regarding standards for local industry or as a whole. Just before to conclude, we also deep dive on some countries. What is the cost? Because that will be also an impact on the offer. The cost of that new fuel for aviation will be for France, regarding the evolution of the traffic, up for the cost of the operation up to 45%. By 2050. So that means that the costs due to the evolution of the fuel. So maybe we could produce faster with much innovating, new innovation of the process. Not so sure that we could happen, but that's also need which kind of support we could have from the passengers. And they mentioned that there are the willingness to pay, but not 45%. Huh? They told us a share for 20%. So that's a key question. What does it mean and how to manage the sensibility regarding the pricing on the evolution of the cost if we want such decarbonization of the aviation? Thanks a lot.
Okay, thanks, man. Thank you, Didier, for the research. And I'm reminded of some research that was done right after 9/11 with focus groups, and it told me an interesting story. They asked Americans within 3 weeks of the terrible events of 9/11 one question in their focus groups, and the question was, will you be traveling the rest of this year? And the answer, of course, was a resounding no. They forgot to ask them the second question, which Didier's research now proves. The second question they forgot to ask them is, do you want to? And of course, they were desperate to travel, they just didn't know that they could. And looking at the numbers that Didier just shared with us, the demand is strong, even willingness to pay is strong. We saw rising gas prices this year, and you know what? We never got to the tipping point where people said they weren't going to drive. They adapted, they just put more people in the cars, and they drove. So it'll be interesting to see if that stays the same way. One of the areas that we haven't talked about today, but we're about to, is sustainability as it applies to luxury travel. And joining us now with a special video presentation is the sustainability editor for the Sunday Times in London, Chris Haslam. Please go to the screen.
Hello, Neem. At the beginning of this month, I wrote a newspaper article calling for the fundamental re-evaluation of the nature of luxury. Luxury travel occupies a position of great responsibility in our world. Its accoutrements, from the private jets to the private yachts, from the fine dining to the even finer surroundings, are the most demonstrative indicators of personal privilege or success. Images of power couples sipping champagne in the first-class cabin, stepping out of the helicopter on the Côte d'Azur, or revelling in high-maintenance isolation epitomise the values to which billions aspire. And this image is out of date. The time when excess, self-indulgence and conspicuous consumption were admirable has gone. And the notion of luxury maintained by the glossy magazines, the advertising industry, the travel trade, has mutated to become an extractive anachronism as manifestly immoral as drink driving. And that too, remember, was once acceptable. In a rapidly warming world where weather patterns could be close to tipping point, where ecosystems and habitats could slip into irrevocable decline, and where hundreds of millions of the world's poorest people will find their homelands uninhabitable, carbon-intensive travel is increasingly difficult to justify. And yet, travel is still a powerful force for good. Tourism is the most effective conduit for the transfer of wealth from the global north to the global south. It provides livelihoods and opportunities for communities with no other means of support. It funds conservation, protecting habitats and wildlife, and it fosters empathy and understanding between cultures and nations. But in many cases, the environmental costs of tourism still vastly outweigh its social and economic benefits, and the five-star sector especially seems unwilling to take its fair share of the burden of change. We all know that greenhouse gas emissions must be cut. A reduction of between 24 and 27 billion tonnes of carbon must be achieved within the next 7 years in order to meet our goal of keeping average temperatures within 1.5 degrees of pre-industrial levels. All the world's promises so far add up to just 4 billion tonnes, leaving the world facing a median warming of 2.4 degrees and a climate disaster. We all know this. But as Greta Thunberg told the UN in 2017, I do not want to believe that, because if you really understood the situation and still kept failing to act, then you would be evil, and that I refuse to believe. We also know that travel has to change before change is forced upon travel. Carrying on as normal in anticipation of the development of carbon removal technologies is like continuing to smoke in the hope of a cure for cancer, and expecting the public to put the climate before their comfort is naive. I mentioned at the start that I wrote an article about this. Well, here's what the readers said. I work hard all year. I see no reason to apologise, or worse, be lectured. Go and annoy someone else. Next, who is this Puritan geek? I like a bit of luxury now and then. Another one. What's the point of grafting away if you can't have a bit of luxury once a year? And finally, my favourite. This was clearly written by someone who can't afford the helicopter. Anger, aggression, irritation, but not one word in refutation of the argument that luxury has to change. The public are fearful of sustainability. Commenters such as those above worry that by choosing the greener, cleaner option, they're ordering the lentils instead of the chocolate cake. And this is a fault of both the media and the industry for promoting sustainability as a necessary compromise rather than as an improved way to travel. To be clear, this is not a socialist manifesto. I'm not suggesting that luxury travel should be outlawed. I'm not saying that the rich should not be able to buy comfort. Rather, that the provision of those comforts somehow leaves the destination in better shape, even fractionally, than it was before the clients arrive. Those clients are unlikely to demand these changes, so it's up to you, the industry, to take away the choice and present a redefined concept of luxury as a fait accompli. Drop the policy of talking to guests on a never say no basis and replace it with one that seeks to challenge established beliefs. Those have already done so, and I'm thinking of companies like Jetwing in Sri Lanka, Attitude in Mauritius and The Long Run in Kenya, have found that when presented with sustainable travel as the only option, guests have quickly discovered that it's not lentils at all. Rather, it's an artisan-baked organic chocolate cake made with local ingredients. For the time being, no one is forcing the luxury sector to change. For as long as there is excess, there will be people willing to pay for it. And while ministers are still excited about travel by private jet, they won't begrudge others the right to carbon-heavy self-indulgence. But there's no avoiding the moral imperative. The values espoused by luxury travel go far beyond the hotels, the private jets and the super yachts. And they can no longer be the values to which billions aspire. As in fashion, change percolates from the top in the travel industry. What the rich are doing today, the poor will be doing tomorrow. And while it may be naive to expect the former to start caring about the latter, it will be all our children who inherit the world that we leave behind. So, trim off the excess. It could be Wagyu beef, diesel generators, Jaffa oranges, wasteful buffets, helicopter transfers, jet fresh oysters, petrol-powered jet skis, imported drinks, imported pasta, imported ketchup in tiny glass jars that ends up in landfill, bottled water, aluminium coffee pods, plastic miniatures of shampoo, big TVs that no one's watching, aircon that no one's using, and all the other toxic particles in the haze of excess and waste hanging over luxury hotels that no amount of greenwash can rinse away. Travellers don't know it, but they can live without tiny jars of imported ketchup, and in doing so they may rediscover the riches lost to homogenised international luxury. I leave you with this. A hotelier in Sri Lanka was discussing the justification of importing fruit from South Africa. If I give a guest an apple, he said, it's nothing special. He has them at home. It's just an apple. But if I give him a guava from the tree in our garden, then that is a luxury. Thank you very much.
Right, yeah, living in a luxury. What was that song again? Who's it by? I can't remember. So who's got the answer to that one? Madonna, of course. Yeah, that was went to early pop phase, wasn't it? Yeah. Right, moving on. I mean, that was amazing. That was basically telling you like it is, luxury travel. Can you really do without those little jars of tomato sauce, ketchup? No, you can, yeah, good. Thank God for that. I think we can avoid that. We can get rid of all those things. And he's right about the TVs. I don't think anybody does use those big TVs anymore in their rooms. So there's an awful lot of stuff that can go by the by. Right, let's talk now about driving sustainability and preparedness through academic rigor. You heard me refer to it before with Edmund, and this session looks at how the private sector is working with government to inform fact-based decision-making thanks to academic rigor and thorough comprehensive data sourcing. We have a minister that you've already met from Jamaica, Edmund Bartlett. I can ask him to come back on the stage, please. We also have a former minister, Nikolina Ankelkova. I haven't seen you for a while. Thank you. Welcome back. A former Minister of Tourism in Bulgaria. Please come up on the stage and take a seat. But first, I want to introduce from Mabrian, Carlos Sendra, who will give us a quick overview of Mambrian's work, and they basically provide data, they source data, and they basically tell governments, provide governments with information, and we'll talk about this a bit more, but advise about policy as well. Give little indicators about policy too. So Carlos, please take it away.
Thank you, Rajan, for the introduction. Good morning, everyone. Let me start by thanking the organizers of the Work for Travel event, Eventis Group and Jacobs Media Group for the opportunity of being here today, sharing our view of how we can help public sector, and especially for sharing a panel with Your Excellencies, which is an honor for me. It is my responsibility to start up the discussion of the panel, and I wanted to do it really straightforward using 4 specific key concepts that I think are important. The first, uncertainty. It is obvious that we are living the most uncertain and unstable era in the recent times for the travel and tourism sector. This is not only related to the pandemic, this is related to a lot of unexpected events that are coming up lately. We can talk about wars, natural disasters, we can talk about labor force crisis, for example, because uncertainty means that anything can happen, so we can't control what's coming next. And that's actually the worst scenario for a destination manager, because risks can be measured and managed, but not uncertainty. And given this context, we need to be resilient, right? And this is the second concept I want to talk about, resilience. Define it how the ability to adapt our decisions, our actions to the contextual changes. How can we be resilient if we can't foresee the contextual changes? The only answer for that is updated information. We need updated information based in real-time observation of behavior, real-time observation of the context, and real-time interpretation of all that together. That's the base of what we call the travel intelligence, right? Only by adding information to the uncertainty curve, we can identify and measure different risks and scenarios. And this takes us to the third concept I want to introduce, the challenge, right? You'll see how the most of this concept has been commented already during the morning, right? Challenge, because are the public entities, the tourism public entities, ready to face this challenge? To be completely sincere or honest, I must say that the most of them not ready. However, the public entities are more and more aware that the current context needs an extreme agility and extreme flexibility to make decisions and to be resilient. And those two values can only be provided the most of the times for the private sector, right? And this takes us to the fourth concept. Last but not least, probably it will ring the bell to all of you, we will be all agreed that this is the king concept of all discussions lately in management tourism, right? But in this case, I want to point out that we have here a big difference. Here, with tourism sustainability, we don't need to deal with uncertainty because we know the risks. We know the consequence of our acts. So we know what's going to happen, right? At this point, data analytics and travel intelligence can help us by providing measurement tools, by providing information in order to help destination managers knowing why they are, what can they do, and especially identifying the results of their actions, right? Only using all these tools, the public entities can really make a step forward in terms of making a more sustainable and efficient management, right? Probably the most I've said till now has sounded ethereal or too generic, but I promise I'm bringing specific use cases, specific success cases to showcase how collaboration between public and private entities, it's a reality, and we have a lot of examples that they are making synergies to take the decision-making to a higher level in terms of efficiency and sustainability. Back to you, Rajan.
Thank you, Carlos. Take a seat. Have a seat here. And I omitted to say, and it's great that she can still do this, that Rita Marcan from Portugal is going to join us too, because Portugal is a very interesting case. Hello, Rita. Is a very interesting case of a country that has done a lot of this work. I will come to you in a second. I just want to ask Carlos a couple of questions, but you've done an awful lot of research, and the record of Portugal in recent years proves that it does work. But I want to ask you a little bit more about that shortly. Carlos, just first of all, just explain to us, just go back to basics. What are you doing? What information are you sourcing, and what are you doing? You're responding to governments asking you for this stuff? What?
Well, we basically transform data from global sources into information and help governments to interpret that information in order to make decisions, right? Management decisions, promotional decisions, sustainable decisions, etc.
And what information are you mining, and how are you finding this information?
Well, we're working with a large portfolio of sources. We can talk about, for example, social listening. Mr. Bartlett was mentioning the importance of monitoring what the visitors, the travelers are saying, their perceptions. This is a part of what we do. The spontaneity on their behavior, their searches in internet, in meta searches, in OTAs, their spontaneous interactions in social networks. We work with air connectivity data. We work as well with credit card data. We have a great agreement with MasterCard, a global agreement that can, that permits us having a lot of information about the spending patterns of the travelers. We have a lot of information about accommodation. We have information about the usage of different applications, so we can identify patterns of presence and mobility of the visitors to a destination. There is a large list of different types of data we work with.
Why are you doing it? I'm going to come to Rita in a second, but why do you do it? And you provide information for a lot of governments, but why can't governments do it themselves? Why do they need companies like you?
It's a matter of agility, and I would say it's a matter also of getting this large network of contacts and providers of data. I will say how I think it, right? It's much easier for a startup company, technological company, getting access to all this data than for a government.
Okay, Rita, Portugal. I'm going to say this anyway. You've won Best Tourism Destination Country of the Year 5 times in a row at those awards recently. You have done well since COVID, I think, in terms of not just volume, but value, because that's what we're talking about as well. But tell me how you have utilized data and information and all that stuff. How have you used that to shape your tourism policies?
Data is absolutely critical to the business. And so we have a very specific team working under the National Tourist Board that deals only with data. So we have information about the guests themselves. We have the information geographically dispersed information about the hotel accommodations and to know exactly where we should invest next, for instance, in order to support in a better way investors, in order to make them, aware of the level of competition that is around a specific villa or specific city. We have information about forward bookings, meaning that we know exactly how many routes we are going to have in the short term, how many passengers are buying tickets to Portugal. So what I'm saying is that everything is online, and from a political point of view, this really helps me to decide what is going to be the next move. I just want to say one more thing that I think is valuable. Is nowadays, we have a promotion budget of around 50 million euros a year. And we don't invest anymore on paper or in any other means of communication. So we just invest in social networks, meaning that we know exactly how to target the client, how to customize the message to our potential consumer. And this gives us a huge potential, to grab the customer in a very rapid and very assertive way, because we know him, we know her, we know her needs, his needs, and we try, to grasp him or her in order to, to present our proposal in a very targeted way. So not only data is needed to foster investment, to foster smart investment, not only needed to decide from a political point of view what's the next move, but also to target the client, to target our consumer, and try to persuade him or her to come to Portugal, to visit the Portugal, not only to visit, right? Because tourism is I would say, a showroom of what we can provide as a country. So yes, the first time he or she comes as a visitor, the next time he or she comes as an investor, and foreign direct investment is really crucial to all of us in Portugal. So Portugal, it shows, it's a way of showing the country, showing our competitive advantages, not only to the tourists, but to all the potential investors.
How much does it help you make decisions that promote sustainability in terms of, for example, diversifying destinations, in other words, having more places to go in Portugal, creating more places, making sure there isn't over-tourism? Also measuring, for example, I noticed that one of Carlos's indicators, that he weighs up income against carbon emissions. There's actually a figure you come to, isn't there? How much of the information that you're getting is helping you do that?
Oh, a lot of information has been provided, has been given to me in order to better cope with over-tourism. So I know exactly, I already mentioned, I gave you already some examples. So we know exactly where, when people are buying the tickets to come to Portugal. So I know exactly how do they distribute themselves among our airports. And if I need to pressure a little bit, people coming to Porto instead of Lisbon, for instance, up in the north or up in the south, in Algarve, we can, stimulate, incentivate, targeting new customers according to the social media action plan that I mentioned before. So this gives us the ability not only to react, but also to react rapidly in a very, very assertive way. It's also valuable to say that all this data, it's very important for the companies themselves be aware of their own positioning towards sustainability. So we do have a public dashboard, and where all the companies can upload their data concerning that is related to sustainability, not only environmental sustainability, and I'm talking about water consumption or energy efficiency consumption, biodiversity pressure, all of that, but also social responsibility, social sustainability. We go for the ESG goals, ESG principles, environmental, social, and governance. So as far as social is concerned, it's very important because, you know, we are aware, and companies are aware themselves of what type of contractual regime they are having with their workers in order to foster, you know, a stable relationship between them and the workforce, for instance. We know exactly what type of level of salaries are being implemented in the industry, the diversity of the workforce, gender balance, the qualification of the workers, how they balance personal and professional life. So all this information is crucial not only for us politicians, for the National Tourism Board, of course, but also for the companies themselves to understand what type of position do they have compared with their peers.
Thank you. And I think, like you, like Portugal, Spain also provides its information to companies, right? To private companies.
Yeah, I must say that the case of Portugal is a great case to highlight because they are doing really well. I know very well the team at Visit Portugal, Luis Araujo, Sergio Guerreiro. In fact, exactly. I met Luis last year in Évora, in this event in Évora, and actually they're doing well. In Spain also is also creating a great platform in terms of sharing knowledge for the sector, public and private sector, so they can use all that information in order to make better decisions. So yeah, all countries are now in a race to create all these kind of, let's say, data lakes or open data portals. But yeah, some of those countries are leading that.
Okay, thank you. Let's turn to Bulgaria. So Portugal and Bulgaria, I suspect, are in a way different ends of the spectrum in a way, in terms of tourism. Bulgaria is still kind of in a way reshaping its tourism offer, isn't it? How much are you relying on data and information on this?
Well, first of all, Roger, thank you really for that opportunity to speak, and I would like to use the opportunity to thank the organizers. It's an honor and pleasure being this present at the second edition of A World to Travel. Very important to share views how to move forward in tourism, and in particular having all these challenges, the post-COVID, and of course the war in Ukraine, which affects also the travels and tourism. But going back to data, I mean, it's crucial, and economy and tourism becomes data-driven. And during my leadership as Minister of Tourism, we launched a unified information tourist system in 2019 that actually has all this data that Rita described, where we obliged all the accommodation establishments, plus restaurants, plus tour operators, everybody to report in that system guests from where they come, like gender, also interest, which region in the country. And in this system we oblige also our municipalities and region to report the data, and including the National Income Agency, so we can actually calculate in advance how much the income from tourism guests will be, not only international but also local, where they spend their money. So this, as Rita says, helps very much creating the marketing strategy, and also the so-called regional destination offices are as well part of that system. So we try to unite really all the stakeholders in the system, which actually now gives a huge opportunity to analyze, which is very important for the government and the politicians involved to take the right decision, where to direct their financial resources, because usually budget is always limited. And it's very important to have focus, and then to build up once you see that that the tourists that are coming from a certain destination are confident with Bulgaria in our case. So we focus immediately to build on another destination. Right. And I think this is really crucial because just for an example that I share a lot when we talk usually, but I was the one to set up the Ministry of Tourism as a separate administration, and big challenge, it was in 2014. And since then we managed to increase international arrivals with 34%, reaching 9.3 million in 2019. Then of course COVID came, and now it's very important, the current government, to try to restore that number of visitors, but as we all rightly said, with sustainable tourism products, not just number of tourists, but quality, and not only, and the quality is related really to sustainability, as Rita said, social, governmental sustainability, environmental sustainability, all in line with the Green Deal of Europe, European Union, where actually as member we have to follow. And I use the opportunity that the Minister Bartlett is here, and I would like to thank him for the leadership regarding the Tourism Resilience and Crisis Management Center. And we have established a satellite center in Bulgaria, where actually we, in cooperation with the Bulgarian universities, and in particular with the center with the University for National and World Economy, which is the largest economic university in Bulgaria, we would really like to focus on data analytics and also related to crisis management in terms of natural disasters. And not only we see what happened with COVID and nobody was prepared, but simply climate change issues, everything related to data management that will help governments and private sector and non-profit organizations to deal with and to move with tourism sustainability forward.
Which takes us very neatly to, Edmund, what you do and what the University of the West Indies does in terms of, when we talked about academic rigor, as you know, as Nicolina said, that you're setting up satellites, if like other centres around the world. But how useful has this resource been for you?
Well, firstly, I think some say we perhaps are either clairvoyant or prophetic. Or actually, the first resilience center we established outside of Jamaica was in Nairobi in 2019. And I inaugurated that center at the Kenyatta University in December of 2019. And the pandemic was declared in March of 2020. So last year when I went back to the university to review how they're doing, and incidentally they're doing extremely well, the Vice Chancellor declared, oh, here comes Prophet Bartlett. So I said, okay, that must have an IT in it and not a PH. But to make the point that yes, we're very happy that there has been this appreciation of the importance of developing data as a guidepost to managing and being able to allocate resources better, more efficiently, and to prioritize. But also, we think that there was a need for us to create something of a resilience barometer to measure the level of resilience of countries for the purpose of providing data to guide investment decisions, to guide visitor choices, to guide government's allocation of resources for planning and development, and for determination as to where to build, how to build, should you build, and then to provide the basis for education, hard knowledge generation on various subjects in relating to building better, building stronger, building more efficiently, building more resilient, of course, but sustainable. So the universities, I think, Rajan, has this critical role of not just mining data and information, but of enabling the crucible through which that data must flow, and to provide access to that data. And I think that the young people, that's the future. And that's where the new ideas will now generate. And I wanted to indicate that the government has a role now. Government has a role to create the framework, the legislative and regulation arrangements that enable incentivization of ideas. We in Jamaica just developed and launch the Tourism Innovation Incubator. Now, the purpose of that incubator is to provide young people from all over the island with an opportunity to bring the next big idea to tourism. And we put 40 million Jamaican dollars. It's an awful lot in US terms, but it's 40 million Jamaican dollars to enable these young people, wherever they are, whatever station they belong to. Because we realize that tourism is driven by ideas and the experiences that we sell, that the visitor consumes, is driven by ideas. And Jamaica wanted to become a destination outside of the competitive field. You know this blue ocean strategy? And the red ocean where all you guys are fighting and it's bloody? Well, we don't want to be in that. We want to be where you see Jamaica as being a special, different destination with a value proposition that is compelling. And it's only done by new ideas. And so that's the whole purpose of the incubator, is to create that framework, that repository of new ideas that will then be able to convert into material goods and services that will bring value and add to the quality of the experiences that we provide. So to make the point beyond any other discussion, that data, 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 and more data is what's going to determine the next level of quality tourism, and it will inform how we manage the next set of disruptions that are coming.
Thank you. I'm going to connect, actually, Nicolina, you and Carlos, because you did a survey which showed the impact of the loss of Russian tourists this summer to Bulgaria's tourism economy. Now, A, how did you do that? And B, what does that tell Bulgaria? I mean, how does that guide Bulgaria? Do you want to speak to that first, Nicolina?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I could say that in 2019, we had in total Russian tourists visiting Bulgaria not more than 400,000, like 450. So from number one as summer tourists in 2014, in 2019 they became number 7 or 8. So actually the loss of Russian tourists didn't really affect it so much, the international arrivals. What really affected them, and it still affects them, is the fact that the war in Ukraine, I mean, Ukraine is closer to us, it's 300 kilometers. And this is where most efforts are put to transmit the message that the destination is secure and safe, regardless all these challenges and this strategy that happens. And this is the most important, because usually people choose destination that is safe. And in particular, after COVID, it becomes more and more sensitive. And this is what we all have to transmit. And here, going back also to what we talk about, the data-driven tourism, I think digital transformation in this sector is crucial. And this is where also in 2020, when we were preparing the operational programs, the next generation of them within the EU, and then the Recovery and Resilience Plan of the European Union in mid-2020, we offered some grants or subsidies to SMEs that are going to digitally transform their business, which also is very important for the private sector to be in line with what is happening with the fourth industrial revolution, the digital transformation generally, that every day really brings something new. And everything happens online. So on one side are the systems, the data, unified tourist information systems, the data that it's crucial for governments to take a decision and for the private sector and NGOs to be informed. And on the other side is the digital transformation itself for the private sector in order to cope and really address the future sustainable tourism products that are expected. But talking about Russia, it is not affecting so much international arrivals as it would have been, for example, 10 years ago.
Okay. I've been told, I've got to cut this very quickly, but Rita, I want one last word to you, which is just how responsible do you think data sourcing and then the analysis of that data has improved your tourism offer? How much of a difference has it really made? And I'm talking in a sense to other tourism providers who may not be using that much of data, but what would you say to them? Do it.
Smart decisions now are more crucial than ever. And you cannot be smart without data. You can take decisions, that's for sure. You take the risk, you decide, you hope for the best. But at the end of the day, we need to be quick and we need to be assertive, we need to be focused because resources are limited. And this means that you have to make smart decisions. And without data, I think it would be very, very impossible to do that, especially if you have limited resources. And that's the case of Portugal, and I guess that's the case of Jamaica or Bulgaria. And so data here plays a huge role, not only for me as a politician, but also for the National Tourism Board that has decided in a daily basis what to do next, but also for the companies, for the workers, for the tourists. And you know what? Data give us the confidence and the trust to move on. And this is important. We already mentioned that. Security, the stability, certainty are assets that need to be nurtured and pampered. This means that without data, we'll have huge levels of uncertainty, so not so certain mindset. And data give us the confidence, the trust to move on and to make smart decisions, as I said before.
Thank you so much, Rita. It's a pity you can't be with us in person, but thank you for your contribution. That's brilliant.
Thank you so much.
Edmund, I'm going to have to stop it here, but
I want to give you something. I think as we talk about data, my assistant will just nip by. We published the first book after the pandemic on resilience, tourism resilience, with a case study of the Jamaican experience, but with very strong scholarly contribution on various elements of resilience. And so I want to present that book to you. It's co-authored by myself and Professor Lloyd Waller, who is the Executive Director of the Global Tourism Resilience and Crisis Management Center in Jamaica. So you're getting the first copy.
I'm getting it. Fantastic. I'll let you read it as well, Carlos, if you want.
Yes, of course, Carlos. We will have one for you too. But this one is for you, Rajan. And we are also using the opportunity to telling you now publicly that you will be the moderator at the first ever Global Tourism Resilience Day observation in Kingston, Jamaica. February 7th.
I've got that data embedded in my mind. Thank you. Thank you very much. Wow. Okay. Thank you, panel. We have to move on quickly. Thank you very much. Now, I'm hoping that Jennifer Ruiz is in the room. Is she around? Jennifer? Oh, good, thank you. Okay, here we go. Just imagine that you have a challenge in your own tourism destination and you have one place to get your answers. Well, that is what MasterCard say they are offering. Our next speaker can share with us a fantastic example of how...
about a more sustainable, resilient, and inclusive industry. And this is the objective of the new MasterCard Tourism Innovation Hub that was launched earlier this year in 2022, located in Madrid, but with a global scope. So we want to put destinations and people at the heart of everything we do and contribute to build a more sustainable industry. And what you may be wondering, what do we do? What does the Tourism Innovation Hub do? So first of all, we support destinations, but also the private sector to digitalize the tourism industry, to transform the tourism industry, and we also help them to design new solutions that may not exist in the market right now. So if we can go to the next slide. Okay, one more, please. Yes, thank you. So this, what you can see in the screen, are the objectives of the Tourism Innovation Hub, or what we do. So first of all, as I mentioned before, we help destinations to transform their tourism business with the set of solutions that MasterCard has. Of course, we have very interesting data that we can leverage to help destinations to better understand how tourism works, tourism flows, etc., as it was discussed in the previous session, including the partnership that we have with Mabrian. But also we have solutions to help destinations in their marketing efforts to position themselves. We have priceless experiences to offer unique initiatives or activities to tourists. We can support them with their tourism campaigns, and also even to measure and track the impact of these initiatives. And of course, we have sustainable solutions, which is the objective of this event, such as the carbon calculator to calculate the CO2 impact of our purchases, and such other platforms such as the donation platform to contribute to certain causes by donating money. But the other thing we do, as I mentioned before, is design new sustainable solutions, and we do this by, first of all, inspiring destinations and stakeholders by giving them access to key thought leadership and our network of experts, to connect people or all the stakeholders in the tourism industry to exchange information, knowledge, etc. And what is more important, we help destinations to co-create solutions, to ideate these new solutions that don't exist in the market with our design thinking experts. So as I mentioned, okay, thank you.
Oh, you're in charge now.
Okay.
Very
Yes,
good.
it's working. So as I was saying, we collaborate with industry players to build this more sustainable tourism, so tourism that is beneficial for everyone, so including communities, destinations, tourists, private companies, and of course SMEs too. And we connect the public entities, the private entities, and also we had a network of innovation partners with the solutions that they offer to solve some of the problems that we see in the market right now. So this is what the TIH is. And we've identified several challenges that any destination must face nowadays. And of course, sustainability is key, is one of the key pillars. So we think that it's time to reimagine a more sustainable, resilient, and inclusive tourism. But I think that the best way to explain our work is by showing or explaining one of the projects that we've done recently. It's a very innovative project, very easy to understand at the same time, and it's an end-to-end approach for a destination such as Costa Rica. So in Costa Rica, Costa Rica is well known for being a very sustainable destination, famous for its environment, the wildlife, everything is green there. But after the pandemic, they had a need to design a new strategy to attract travelers again, and also increase their sustainability awareness of travelers. They wanted to attract more sustainable conscious travelers. So we've been helping Costa Rica in the last months to design this new strategy or new program, which is a very holistic program covering different solutions and different steps in the customer journey, of course. And first of all, I must mention that we did this project in partnership with the Costa Rica National Bank, and also with the Costa Rica DMO, which is the Costa Rica Tourism Institute. So the three entities have been working together to implement this program, and what you can see in the screen is the solution or the journey that we propose for travelers arriving in Costa Rica. So let's say I'm a tourist, and I arrive at the Costa Rica airport, at the San Jose airport. So there, the first thing I find is a machine where I can print a prepaid card, biodegradable card that I can use when I'm in Costa Rica for any purchases I want to make. You can use it then later in other countries, of course, but today I will speak about Costa Rica. And it's not only about getting this prepaid card, but every time that a prepaid card is issued, the tourist is making a donation to protect the local wildlife. In this case, it's the turtles and the sharks in Costa Rica. So imagine that the first thing you do when you arrive in Costa Rica is contributing to the local, the protection of the local wildlife. I think that's pretty good as a first step in Costa Rica. So
it's a donation, or it's actually a levy? Which one is it a tax or is it a donation?
It's a donation.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a donation you do automatically when you get the card. Then you download the app where you can load the card and, of course, control your expenses. And then you start using it for whatever you want. Buy some souvenirs, experiences, restaurants in Costa Rica. And every time you do a transaction, you can get an overview, or you can see the real impact of your purchases with the carbon calculator that it's included in the card app. So you can see the real impact of your decisions. The total CO2 emissions, but also the split by category, which I think it's really good because it helps you to really understand that you have an impact with what you do.
Can I just ask you a question about that? So, for example, you buy something, a meal at a restaurant, and it will tell you what the carbon. Yeah,
exactly. So you get this graph that you can see in the screen, and it's split it by category of purchase. So let's say restaurants, accommodations, apparel. So yeah, you can see exactly the real impact of what of the way you behave in Costa Rica. Yes.
And presumably you'll get more sophisticated because everything that you do at some point, maybe, I don't know, but in the future, it's not just purchases, but it's your whole daily behavior that can somehow be computed into the system, and it will tell you what the effect is, your carbon emissions of everything you do, or your environmental effect of everything you do.
Yes, as long as it's linked to the card or to your bank transactions, you can see the real impact.
Great.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. Go.
But yeah, what is even better is that you can understand your CO2 emissions, but at the same time you can decide to compensate these CO2 emissions by donating some money to local causes, or in this case to the MasterCard Priceless Planet Coalition, to plant trees. The objective is to plant 100 million trees in different countries. So you can contribute and compensate your CO2 emissions by donating some money and help to protect the environment. So as you can see, it's a very easy to understand solution or journey. This is the first phase. The card is going to be launched in the next months, but we're already working on a second phase of the project that will probably include some experiences, unique experiences, priceless experiences in the country. And also we're seeing how to support the local community, the local SMEs there, to make them more digital, to attract more travelers to buy there, etc. So this is just the first step, but the idea is that we will have a second phase that will be even more complete. So what I find very interesting about this project is that, first of all, we're supporting Costa Rica to differentiate the destination as a sustainable destination, so to promote this branding. We're supporting local causes. I've mentioned that every time a card is issued, you're donating some money to the protection of the of the turtles and the sharks in Costa Rica. But for me, the key point is that you're contributing and helping tourists to understand their emissions and make more conscientious spending choices. And the final idea is that if you become more sustainable in Costa Rica by implementing small changes in your daily life, you can take this back to your home country and continue working on making your choices more sustainable. So I see this as a long-term commitment for tourists. And finally, we're also helping the digitalization or facilitating the digitalization of payments, which is good for the economy as a whole, but especially for SMEs, and also for tourists because we're enhancing the security and trust for consumers and merchants, so consumers don't have to take any cash with them, which means safety at the end. And of course, we're increasing the payment security. So yeah, this is a project that we've done in Costa Rica. It's an example that we really like. We think it's very innovative, easy to understand, and has a huge impact at the same time. But we're doing many more in other national, local, regional destinations. And of course, from the Tourism Innovation Hub, we will be happy to continue supporting as many destinations as possible to become more sustainable.
Thank you very much. I've got to ask you, and I'm sure people will be in the audience thinking, what's in it for MasterCard? Why are MasterCard doing it?
Why? Because, no, as I mentioned before, we really believe in a more sustainable tourism. That's why MasterCard has launched this initiative globally, which is the Tourism Innovation Hub, because we really want and we really believe in a more sustainable future. So it's not just making business, it's us wanting to contribute to a better tomorrow.
And you're the first credit card in a sense to do this, right? You're the first company to do this?
You mean the hub, sorry?
Yeah.
Yes. We've implemented this hub in Madrid. We also have a sustainability lab in Stockholm. There are several labs or hubs around the world focused on different topics, and MasterCard has decided to open this one in Madrid, given the relevance of the Spanish tourism industry, but we will help destinations worldwide.
Well, we have the presence of a rival company here, obviously, with Amex GBT. It'd be interesting to see what else happens in this sphere. But congratulations on, because I know you are so personally involved in this. So, well done and congratulations on this.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Jennifer Ruiz, thank you. Okay, now I've been passed a message which I think says that basically we are actually going to have a lunch break. I think that's right. And that the case study with Google is going to happen after lunch, which is at 2:45-ish. And is everybody coming back into this room for that, or are we splitting into sorry. We're splitting into the tracks, so it'll be in track 1 here, right? Okay, so this is where, and I realise that there is not everybody here at the moment, but pass this message on. We now, from after lunch, split into 2 tracks, which start at 2:45. The second track, which I will be chairing, is at the what is it again? I've forgotten now. I haven't been there yet. That's right, the Museum of Romanity, exactly. Romanity is a word, isn't it? Yeah. Yes, I was there last night, in fact, I know where we are. So there is where half the tracks are. You've got programs there that will show you, and the other area is here, obviously, to come back here. So thank you very much, and if you hadn't had lunch, enjoy.